"Get that filthy woman and her brats out of my restaurant now!" Victoria Caldwell hurled her wine glass, and it shattered against the wall inches from a little girl's head. The child screamed. The tired mother dropped to her knees, shielding all 3 children with her own body as red wine ran down the wall like blood. What Victoria didn't know, the filthy woman, was her own son's ex-wife. Those 3 terrified children were her grandchildren, and her son Ethan was sitting 10 feet away watching a small boy look up with eyes identical to his own. If you're watching, subscribe and stay with me to the very end because this story only gets bigger. And comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Ethan Caldwell had built an empire on the ability to read a room in under 3 seconds. He could walk into a boardroom of 40 people and know within a single breath who feared him, who admired him, and who was lying. He had closed billion-dollar deals on instinct alone. He had stared down men twice his age and never blinked. But sitting in that small Brooklyn restaurant on a gray afternoon with a half-finished cup of coffee cooling in front of him, Ethan Caldwell could not read anything at all. His mind had simply stopped because the boy was staring back at him. The child couldn't have been more than 4 years old. He had a mop of dark hair that refused to lie flat exactly the way Ethan's own hair had looked in every childhood photograph his mother had ever framed and displayed. He had a stubborn set to his small jaw, and he had eyes, deep, storm-colored gray-green eyes flecked with amber near the center that Ethan had seen only in one place his entire life, his own mirror. "Mama," the boy said, tugging at the woman's sleeve, "that man is looking at me." The woman didn't turn around. She was too busy apologizing to a waiter, too busy trying to fold the stroller with one hand while holding a squirming toddler girl with the other. "I'm so sorry," she was saying, her voice thin with exhaustion. "We won't take up much room, just a small table. Anywhere is fine. The corner, please." And then she turned. And Ethan's heart, the same organ that surgeons had once told him was in perfect condition, felt as though it had been reached into and squeezed by a fist. Claire. 5 years. 5 years he had told himself he'd moved on. 5 years he had let his mother's voice fill the silence where his wife used to be. Let the company swallow every empty hour. Let the word divorce become a thing, he said without flinching. And now here she was, 30 feet away, thinner than he remembered, dark circles beneath her eyes, a small tear at the shoulder seam of her jacket, holding a little girl who had Claire's exact nose. Claire hadn't seen him yet. She was scanning the room for a table, her whole body tense in that particular way of a woman who had learned to expect that she would be asked to leave. "Claire," Ethan said. He didn't decide to say it. The name simply left him. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't move at all. Her back straightened. The little girl in her arms babbled something and grabbed a fistful of her hair, and Claire didn't even flinch. She just stood there, staring at the wall, as if she could unhear a voice she had spent 5 years trying to forget. Then slowly she turned her head. Their eyes met, and Ethan watched every emotion a human being could feel cross her face in the space of 2 seconds. Shock, fear, a flash of something that might have been longing, and then hardening over all of it like ice over a lake, cold, absolute anger. "No," Claire whispered. "No, no, no." "Claire, wait. Lucas, Noah, Emma, we're leaving." She was already turning, already reaching for the stroller she had just barely managed to open. "We're going somewhere else. Come on, now." The little boy who had Ethan's eyes, Lucas, apparently didn't move. He was still staring at Ethan with the fearless, unfiltered curiosity of a small child. "But Mama, we just got here. I'm hungry." "I'll buy you anything you want," Claire said, her voice cracking. "Anywhere, just not here. Come on, baby, please." Ethan was on his feet before he understood he'd stood up. "3," he heard himself say. The word came out strange, strangled. "There are 3 of them." Across the room at a table draped in the kind of quiet luxury that money buys Victoria Caldwell had gone very still. She had been dining with a business associate, the meeting Ethan had reluctantly agreed to attend, the reason he was in this neighborhood at all. She had noticed her son's stand. She had noticed the strange, disheveled woman, And now, following her son's gaze, she was beginning to notice the children. "Ethan," Victoria said sharply, "sit down. You're making a scene." He didn't hear her. "Claire." He took a step toward her, then another, forgetting the coffee, forgetting the meeting, forgetting 5 years and a company worth more than most nations. "Are those—" "Don't." Claire's voice came out like a blade. She positioned herself between him and the children, her arms spread slightly, a mother becoming a wall. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. You don't get to finish that sentence." "They have my eyes," Ethan said. It was the wrong thing to say. He knew it the instant it left his mouth. Claire's face contorted, and for a moment he thought she might scream, might strike him, might do something that would shatter the fragile control she was holding on to by her fingernails. Instead, she laughed, a terrible broken laugh with no humor anywhere in it. "Your eyes," she repeated. "That's what you notice. After 5 years, that's the first thing out of your mouth. Not 'Are you okay, Claire?' Not 'How have you been surviving, Claire?' Not 'I'm sorry, Claire.'" She shook her head, and a tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand so violently it looked like she hated herself for crying. "You look at my children, and the first thing you see is what belongs to you." "That's not—" Ethan stopped. "Because it wasn't it. That was exactly what he'd done. Claire, I didn't know. I swear to you on everything I have, I didn't know they existed." "Of course you didn't know." Her voice dropped low and venomous. "You made very sure you'd never have to know." And there it was again, that word she'd thrown at him, that accusation, buried inside it the shape of a history he didn't recognize. "What are you talking about?" "Ethan!" Victoria was standing now, too, moving toward them with the elegant gliding walk that had intimidated 3 generations of society women. "Whoever this woman is, she is clearly unwell. Let the manager handle it. We have a meeting." Claire's head snapped toward the older woman, and something happened in Claire's face that Ethan would think about for weeks afterward, a recognition, a fury so deep and so old it seemed to come from somewhere beneath her bones. "You," Claire breathed. Victoria's expression flickered, just for an instant, a crack in the porcelain. "I'm sorry, do I know you? You know exactly who I am." "I'm afraid you're mistaken." Victoria's voice was smooth as glass, but Ethan, who had spent his entire life reading his mother's face, saw the thing she was trying to hide. He saw that she was lying. "Mom," Ethan said slowly, "do you know her?" "Don't be absurd. I've never seen this woman in my life." "You're lying." The words fell into the restaurant like a stone into still water. Victoria turned to her son, and for the first time in Ethan's memory, she looked genuinely afraid. Not of Claire, of him, of what he might be about to figure out. "Ethan, sweetheart, you're overwrought. Come sit down." But Ethan wasn't looking at his mother anymore. He was looking at the 3 children, the little girl Emma with Claire's nose and a smear of something on her cheek watching the adults with wide eyes, the second boy Noah quieter than his brother, half hidden behind the stroller chewing on the sleeve of a sweater that had clearly been patched more than once, and Lucas, brave, curious Lucas, who had walked right up to the strange man and was now looking up at him with a question in his impossible gray-green eyes. "Are you my daddy?" Lucas asked. The entire restaurant went silent. Claire made a sound like she'd been struck. "Lucas, because I don't have one." Lucas continued in the guileless way of children who have not yet learned which questions are allowed. "The other kids at school have daddies. Tommy has a daddy who takes him to the park. I asked Mama why I don't have one, and she got sad, so I stopped asking. But you look like me. So are you my daddy?" Ethan Caldwell had negotiated with prime ministers. He had survived a hostile takeover attempt that had made the front page of every financial paper in the country. He had buried his father and delivered a eulogy without his voice breaking once. He knelt down on the floor of that little Brooklyn restaurant in a suit that cost more than the restaurant's monthly rent, and he could not speak. "Lucas," he finally managed. "That's your name, Lucas." The boy nodded. "Do you—" Ethan swallowed. "Do you like the park?" "I love the park, but we don't go much because Mama works a lot. She works at the diner in the mornings and cleans offices at night, and sometimes on Saturdays she does deliveries, so I have to stay with Mrs. Rodriguez, who smells like soup." Lucas said all of this in one breath, delighted to finally have an audience. Are you rich? You look rich. Your watch is shiny. Lucas, that's enough, Claire said, and now her voice was breaking apart entirely. Please, baby, please stop. Claire, Ethan looked up at her from where he knelt on the floor. Please, just tell me, are they mine? For a long moment, she said nothing. Her chin trembled. Behind her, Victoria was saying something about lawyers, and about how none of this had been established, and about how the children could be anyone's, but her words were just noise now, static, meaningless. Yes, Claire whispered. They're yours. They've always been yours. And you were never supposed to know. The restaurant, the city, the empire, the wedding he was supposed to be planning, to a woman he didn't love, all of it fell away. There was only Claire, and there were only these 3 children, and there was the crushing, dizzying weight of 4 years he had lost and would never get back. Why, Ethan said. It wasn't even a question. It was a wound. Why would you keep them from me? And Claire looked at him with 5 years of grief and rage packed behind her eyes, and she said the thing that would take Ethan Caldwell the next several months to fully understand. Because you told me you didn't want them. And then you sent me the photographs to make sure I understood you meant it. Ethan blinked. What photographs? Something shifted in Claire's face. A hesitation, a flicker of confusion quickly buried. Don't, she said. Don't pretend. Not now. Not in front of them. Claire, I don't know what photographs you're talking about. The ones of you and her. Her voice shook. In Chicago, the hotel. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I have never. Ethan stood up now, his mind racing, 5 years of certainty, cracking open like ice in spring. Claire, I have never cheated on you. Not once. Not for a single day of our marriage. Stop lying to me. The words tore out of her, and the little girl in her arms began to cry, and Lucas grabbed his mother's leg, and the quiet boy, Noah, put his hands over his ears. Claire pulled all 3 of them closer, and Ethan saw the way her body curved around them, the way 5 years of holding these 3 children up alone had bent her spine and hollowed her cheeks and put those dark shadows under her eyes. Mom! Ethan turned to Victoria. His voice had gone very quiet, and everyone who knew Ethan Caldwell knew that quiet was far more dangerous than shouting. What photographs is she talking about? Victoria lifted her chin. I have no idea. The woman is clearly delusional. She's after your money. Look at her. Look at the state of her. This is a con, Ethan, and you are too intelligent to fall for it. She just told me she didn't ask for a dime. She's manipulating you. Mom! Ethan took a single step toward his mother. Look me in the eye and tell me you don't know anything about photographs of me in a hotel in Chicago. The pause was too long. It was a fraction of a second too long, and in that fraction of a second, Ethan Caldwell, who read rooms in 3 seconds, who had built an empire on his ability to know when he was being lied to, watched his entire understanding of the last 5 years of his life collapse into rubble. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria said. You're lying, Ethan said again, softer this time, almost gentle, and it was the gentleness that made it terrible. You've been lying to me my whole life, and I never noticed because I never once thought I needed to check. But I'm checking now, and I can see it. I can see it on your face. Ethan, what did you do? Victoria's composure held. It always held. That was the thing about his mother. She had a kind of armor that had never once in 62 years been dented. I did what I have always done, she said coolly. I protected this family, and when you've calmed down, you'll thank me for it. Claire made a sound then, half sob, half laugh. Protected, she repeated. Is that what you call it? You call ruining my life, protecting your family. I don't believe I've ever met you, Victoria said, but even she couldn't quite make it sound true anymore. Claire was gathering her children now, her hands shaking, her whole body vibrating with the effort of holding herself together. We're leaving. We should never have come here. This was our place, Ethan. Do you remember? This was our place, before all of it, before I knew what your family was. I brought them here today because, her voice cracked, because sometimes I want to feel like the person I used to be. The person who thought you loved me. That's all I wanted. One afternoon. And I couldn't even have that. Claire, please don't go. Give me one reason." She was crying openly now, no longer bothering to hide it, the tears running freely as she buckled Emma into the stroller and gripped both boys by the hand. "Give me one single reason why I should stand here for one more second in the same room as the two people who destroyed my life." Ethan didn't have a reason, not one he could put into words fast enough. His mind was still reeling, still trying to catch up, still trying to reconcile the woman he'd believed had abandoned him with the woman standing in front of him, who had clearly been abandoned herself. But his body understood something his mind hadn't finished processing. He stepped forward, and very carefully he did the only thing he could think to do. He knelt back down to Lucas's level. "Lucas," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that it's true, okay? Even if I only get to say it once." Lucas looked at him solemnly. "Yes," Ethan said, "I'm your daddy, and I didn't know. If I had known, if anyone had told me, I would have been there. Every day, every single day. I would never have left you. Do you understand me?" Lucas considered this with the seriousness of a small judge. "Then where were you?" The question was so simple, so devastating. "I was lost," Ethan said. "I got lost. But I found you now." "Ethan, stop it." Claire's voice was raw. "Stop making promises. You don't get to walk into a restaurant and become their father in 5 minutes. You have no idea what these children have been through. You have no idea what I've been through. You don't get to fix 5 years with a nice speech." "I know that." Ethan stood facing her. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know it. But those photographs, Claire, if my mother did what I think she did, you always defended her." Claire's eyes were blazing. "That was the whole problem, Ethan. Whatever she said, you believed. Whoever she wanted gone, you let go, including your own wife, including your own children. So don't you dare stand there now, 5 years too late, and act like you're seeing her clearly for the first time. You had 100 chances to choose me. You chose her every single time." The words landed like blows because every one of them was true. Victoria stepped forward, sensing an opening. Her voice honeyed. "Ethan, darling, this woman is trying to poison you against your own mother. Can't you see that after everything I've sacrificed for you?" "Enough!" Ethan's voice cracked like a whip, and Victoria fell silent, genuinely shocked. He had never in his life spoken to her that way. "Not another word. Not one. I'm going to find out exactly what happened. Every detail. And if it's what I think it is, Mother, then God help you, because I will spend every dollar I have making sure you answer for it." For the first time, real fear entered Victoria's eyes. Claire watched this exchange with an expression Ethan couldn't read. Then she shook her head slowly. "It doesn't matter," she said, "even if you find out everything. Even if it's all true. It doesn't give me back the years. It doesn't give my children back a father they cried themselves to sleep wanting. It doesn't undo a single day of the life we've had to live." "Then let me start now," Ethan said. "Not to fix it. I can't fix it. But let me be here now. Let me know them, please, Claire. They're my children, too. They stopped being your children the day you told me a baby would destroy everything you were building." Her voice was ice. "Do you remember saying that? Do you have any idea what it did to me to be pregnant with 3 of your babies? And remember those words?" Ethan went cold. "I never said that." "You did. Claire, I would never. You said it in this very neighborhood in the car on the way home from a dinner where your mother spent the whole night talking about how children ruin ambitious men. You said, and I will remember it until the day I die, a child would destroy everything I'm building. And then you looked out the window like you hadn't just carved my heart out." Ethan searched his memory, frantic, desperate. And there buried deep a fragment, a night he'd barely thought about in years. A dinner, his mother's voice going on, a drive home. Had he said something? Had he been repeating his mother half-drunk on her opinions, thoughtless, cruel in the careless way that ambition makes people cruel? His voice failed. "If I said that, Claire, I was quoting her. I was exhausted, and I was full of her poison, and I said something monstrous without meaning it. But if I had known you were pregnant, that's the point." Claire's voice broke completely now. "I was going to tell you that night. I had it all planned. And you said that, and I put my hand over my stomach where our 3 babies were, and I decided you were never going to know. because I would not raise children with a man who thought they'd destroy him. I would not do that to them, so I protected them from you. And I've never regretted it, not for one single day." The truth of it sat in the air between them, unbearable. And then the second half of it landed on Ethan like an avalanche. "Wait," he said slowly. "You said you were going to tell me that night, but you also said photographs. You said I sent you photographs. When—" Claire's certainty flickered again. "2 weeks later, when I was still deciding whether to leave, I got an envelope, no return address, photographs of you with a woman going into a hotel room in Chicago, and a note." She stopped. Her breathing had gone strange. "What did the note say, Claire?" She looked at him, and for the first time the anger in her eyes was crowded out by something else. Doubt. "It said," she whispered, "he knows about the babies. He wants you gone. Take the money in this account and disappear, or he'll take them from you when they're born." And there was a bank account, with enough money to start over. I never touched it. I was too proud. But the photographs— Her hand went to her throat. "The photographs were real, Ethan. It was you." "Claire!" Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear himself think. "I was in Chicago that month, on business. But I was never in a hotel room with any woman. Do you understand what you're telling me? Someone knew you were pregnant before I did. Someone knew before you'd even decided to leave. Someone photographed me and staged those pictures and sent them to you with a note designed to make you run." Claire's face had gone white. "Who knew you were pregnant?" Ethan pressed. "Before that night. Who else knew?" "No one," Claire whispered. "I hadn't told anyone. I'd only just found out myself. The only person I told—" She stopped. "Who, Claire?" "I called your mother." Claire's voice was barely audible. "I was so scared and so happy and so confused, and I didn't know what to do. And God help me, I thought she was my family. I called Victoria, and I told her I was pregnant with triplets, and I asked her what she thought Ethan would say." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Ethan had ever heard. Both of them turned slowly to look at Victoria Caldwell. Victoria had gone completely still, and the mask, the perfect porcelain mask she had worn for 62 years, had finally irreparably cracked. "You," Claire breathed. "You told me he didn't want them. You told me he was relieved I was thinking of leaving. You told me, oh my God, you told me to check my mail. You said Ethan wanted me to have proof so I wouldn't come back and cause trouble. You knew about the photographs because you sent them." "This is slander," Victoria said, but her voice had lost all its power. "You did this." Claire was shaking so hard she had to grip the stroller to stay upright. "I have spent 5 years raising 3 children in poverty, working myself half to death, telling them their father didn't want them, hating a man who never even knew because of you. You took my whole life. You took their father. You took everything." "Mom." Ethan's voice was hollow. "Tell me she's wrong." Victoria straightened her spine, and in that moment Ethan understood that she was not going to deny it because Victoria Caldwell had never once in her life believed she was wrong about anything. "She was destroying you," Victoria said, and there it was, the confession dressed up as a defense. "You were on the verge of becoming something extraordinary, and she was going to chain you to a diaper bag and a mortgage and a life of mediocrity. 3 children, Ethan. 3. You would have thrown away everything. I could see it happening and no one else could. So yes, I made a decision. I protected your future. And look at you now, a billionaire admired by the entire world. You're welcome." The restaurant was dead silent. Somewhere a fork had stopped halfway to a mouth. Ethan stared at his mother as though he had never seen her before. "You're welcome," he repeated. "You have everything you ever wanted." "I have nothing." The words came out of him low and shattered. "I have a company I built because it was the only thing that could distract me from a loneliness I never understood. I have a wedding planned to a woman I feel nothing for because you told me love was a liability, and I believed you. I have 4 years I will never get back with 3 children I didn't know existed. And I have a woman standing in front of me who I loved more than anything in this world, and who has spent 5 years believing I threw her away." He was crying now openly, and Ethan Caldwell did not cry. "You didn't protect my future mother. You murdered it. And then you handed me the corpse and called it a gift." "Ethan." Victoria reached for him. He stepped back. Don't touch me." Victoria's hand fell to her side, and for the first time in her son's memory, she looked old, small, frightened, but not sorry. Ethan noticed that even now, even in the wreckage of everything, his mother did not look sorry. "I want you to leave," Ethan said to her. "Get in the car. Go home. Do not call me. Do not send anyone to speak for you. I need to figure out how deep this goes, and I cannot do that with you in my line of sight. You'll regret speaking to me this way. I've regretted everything else I ever did because you told me to. This is the first thing I've done for myself in 5 years." He turned his back on her. "Go." For a moment, Victoria didn't move. Then, with the wounded dignity of a queen who has just discovered her kingdom was built on sand, she gathered her coat and walked out of the restaurant, her heels clicking against the floor, and she did not look back. The door closed behind her. And Ethan turned to Claire, who was standing there, surrounded by their 3 children, tears streaming down her face, 5 years of certainty crumbling behind her eyes. "Claire," he said. She shook her head. "I don't know what's real anymore. For 5 years I built my entire life on hating you, on knowing you didn't want us. And now you're telling me—" Her voice failed. "If it's true, if none of it was you, then She looked down at her children, at Lucas, who was watching his parents with an intensity far too old for his years, at Noah still with his hands over his ears, at Emma whimpering in the stroller. "Then I took their father away for nothing. I hated you for nothing. I made them cry for a man who would have loved them." "You didn't know," Ethan said. "You were lied to, by someone you trusted, by someone I trusted. This is not your fault, Claire. None of it is your fault." "Then why does it feel like I'm the one who ruined everything?" Ethan wanted to reach for her. He didn't. He knew he hadn't earned the right. "Because you're the one who's been carrying it," he said quietly. "Alone. For 5 years. Someone builds a bomb and hands it to you and tells you it's a gift, and when it goes off, you're the one holding the pieces. But you didn't build the bomb, Claire. You have to know that. You didn't build it." Lucas tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Are you going to make Mama cry more?" the boy asked. "Because if you are, you have to go away. I'm the man of the house. I protect Mama." Ethan looked down at his son, his 4-year-old son, who had already appointed himself the protector of a woman who'd had no one else to protect her, and something in his chest broke and rebuilt itself in the same instant. "No," Ethan said, and he crouched down again, and he looked Lucas dead in the eye, man to man. "I'm not going to make her cry. I made her cry a long time ago because I was foolish and I let someone lie to me. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to her, and to you, and to your brother and your sister, if you'll let me. I know I have to earn it. I know I can't just show up, but I'm asking you, Lucas, man to man. Will you let me try?" Lucas studied him for a long, long moment, with those gray-green eyes that were Ethan's own eyes, staring back at him across a chasm of lost years. "You have to buy Noah a new toy," Lucas finally said. "His truck broke and he cried, and Mama couldn't fix it, and we couldn't afford a new one. If you're really rich, you have to fix Noah's truck. That's the rule." Ethan let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. "Okay," he said. "I can do that. I'll fix Noah's truck, I promise. And Emma likes stories. Nobody has time to read her stories. I'll read her stories. And Mama's really tired all the time." Lucas's voice dropped suddenly, younger, suddenly small. "She thinks I don't notice, but I do. She cries in the bathroom so we won't hear. Can you make her not so tired?" Ethan looked up at Claire, and Claire was crying so hard now she couldn't speak, one hand pressed over her mouth, and Ethan understood in that moment that whatever it took, whatever it cost, whatever pieces of his old life he had to burn down, he was going to spend the rest of his years making sure this woman never again cried alone in a bathroom so her children wouldn't hear. "Yes," Ethan said, and his voice was steady now, the first steady thing he'd said all afternoon. "I can make her not so tired. I promise you that too." Claire lowered herself into a chair, as though her legs had simply given out. The waiter, who had been frozen this entire time along with the rest of the restaurant, quietly brought a glass of water and set it in front of her and retreated without a word. I need to sit down, Claire whispered. I don't understand what's happening. This morning I woke up hating you. And now, you don't have to understand it all today, Ethan said, taking the seat across from her slowly, carefully, the way you approach something wounded. We have time now. I know that's a strange thing to say after I just stole 5 years, but we do. We have time. I'm not going anywhere, not ever again. You have a wedding, Claire said dully. You said you have a wedding planned. I'm going to cancel it this afternoon. Claire looked at him sharply. Don't do that for me. Don't you dare do that for me. I don't want to be someone's second chance obligation. I've had enough of being someone's problem to solve. I'm not canceling it for you, Ethan said. I'm canceling it because I don't love her, and I never did, and I only agreed to it because my mother arranged it, and I had stopped believing love was something that happened to people like me. I'm canceling it because for 5 years I've been half alive, going through the motions of a life that never felt like mine, and now I understand why. Because the real one, the true one, the only one I ever wanted was ripped out from under me, and I was too blind and too obedient to notice. I'm canceling it for me, Claire, because I would rather have nothing and be honest than have everything and keep living a lie. Claire stared at him for a long moment. You've changed, she said finally. The Ethan I married would never have said any of that. The Ethan you married was a coward who let his mother run his life, Ethan said. I don't know exactly who I am now, but I know I'm not him anymore. He died the moment that little boy asked me if I was his daddy. Lucas, hearing himself mentioned, beamed with pride, and Noah quiet. Noah, who had not said a single word this entire time, slowly took his hands away from his ears. He crept out from behind the stroller. He walked up to Ethan, studying him with wary, careful eyes, the eyes of a child who had learned early that the world was not always kind. Are you really our daddy? Noah asked so softly it was almost a breath. Yes, Ethan said. I really am. Noah considered this, and then in a voice so small it nearly broke every heart in the room, he asked the question that Ethan would carry with him for the rest of his life. Did you not want us? The whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Ethan reached out slowly, and when Noah didn't pull away, he took the little boy's small hand in his own large one. Noah, he said, listen to me. I didn't know about you. Somebody who was supposed to love us all told a terrible lie and kept us apart. But here is the truth, and I need you to hold on to it forever, even on the days you feel sad. If I had known you existed, if I had known there was a little boy named Noah in this world who was mine, I would have crossed oceans to get to you. I would have walked through fire. There is no version of me anywhere that wouldn't have wanted you. Do you understand? The wanting was never the question. The only problem was that they kept you a secret. But there's no secret anymore. And I want you. I want all 3 of you, more than I've ever wanted anything in my whole life. Noah's lower lip trembled, and then he did something that undid Ethan completely. He climbed into his father's lap, and he put his head against Ethan's chest, and he stayed there quiet, as if he'd been waiting his entire short life for exactly this, and hadn't known it until now. Claire watched her son sit in the lap of the man she'd spent 5 years teaching him to resent, and she put her face in her hands and wept. But the weeping was different now. It wasn't only grief. Somewhere inside it, buried and cautious and terrified to hope, was something that felt almost like relief. What happens now? She whispered through her fingers. I don't, Ethan. I have nothing. I have a leaking apartment and 3 jobs and a stroller that barely holds together. And I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know how to let you in. I've been protecting them from you for so long that I don't know how to stop being afraid. Then we go slow, Ethan said. As slow as you need. You set the pace. Every step. I don't get to demand anything from you, Claire. I lost that right, even if I lost it by being lied to. So you tell me. Today, right now, what do you need? Not what I want to give. What do you actually need? Claire lowered her hands from her face. And Ethan saw for the first time in 5 years a crack in the wall she'd built, a single hesitant crack, and behind it, the woman he'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. I need she said slowly, for someone to buy these children lunch, because I told them I'd take them somewhere nice today, and the truth is, I only had enough money for one meal to split between the three of them, and I was going to tell them I wasn't hungry. Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "Order them everything on the menu," he said, his voice thick. "Everything. Whatever they want. And you eat too, Claire. You eat until you're full. I'm going to sit right here and I'm going to watch my family have a meal, and it's going to be the first honest thing I've done in 5 years." And so they did. Lucas ordered a cheeseburger the size of his own head and pancakes on the side because Ethan said he could. Emma got chocolate milk and a grilled cheese cut into tiny triangles, and she smiled a smile that had Claire's whole face in it. Noah stayed in his father's lap for a long time and then finally cautiously slid off to eat, keeping one hand resting on Ethan's arm the entire time as if to make sure he was still real. And Claire ate a full meal for the first time in longer than she could remember, and every few minutes she looked up at Ethan as if she couldn't quite believe he was still sitting there. "I have to ask you something," Ethan said quietly while the children were absorbed in their food. "What?" "The bank account, the one in the note. You said you never touched it." Claire nodded. "Never. It felt like blood money, like being paid to disappear." "That account," Ethan said slowly, "means there's a paper trail. Money doesn't move without leaving a trail. Whoever set it up, my mother or someone she hired, they left evidence. 5 years old, but evidence. And when I find it, Claire, it's going to prove everything. Not just to me, to lawyers, to a judge, if it comes to that. Every dollar my mother spent to tear our family apart is written down somewhere, and I am going to find every last cent of it." Claire's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Why does that matter now? It's done. The damage is done. Because you spent 5 years being called a liar and a gold digger in her head, and maybe in mine, and I want the whole world to know the truth. I want it on paper. I want it undeniable. I want to be able to look our children in the eye when they're older and tell them exactly what happened, and have the proof to back it up, so they never spend 1 second wondering whether their father wanted them." Ethan leaned forward. "And because if my mother did this to us, then she is capable of anything, and she is not going to accept losing quietly. I know her, Claire. She's already in that car right now thinking about how to fix this, how to spin it, how to make me doubt what I saw with my own eyes. I need proof before she has time to bury it." A shadow crossed Claire's face. "You think she'll come after us?" "I think," Ethan said carefully, "that a woman who fabricated photographs and forged a note and moved money to erase her own grandchildren from existence is not a woman who's going to send a nice apology card." He reached across the table slowly, and this time when his hand came near hers, Claire didn't pull away. "But this time you're not facing her alone. This time I know exactly who she is, and I have every resource in the world, and I am going to use all of it to make sure she never gets near this family again." Claire looked down at his hand so close to hers, and after a long moment she let her fingers rest against his, just barely, just for a second. But it was the first time she had touched him in 5 years, and it landed on both of them like the first drop of rain after a drought. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Ethan said. Across the table, Lucas looked up from his cheeseburger cheeks smeared with ketchup and pointed his fork at the two of them. "Are you going to be nice to my mama now?" he demanded. "For real. For real," Ethan said. "For the rest of my life." Lucas nodded satisfied and went back to his burger. And Emma, chocolate milk mustache, and all reached across the table with a sticky little hand and patted her father's arm as if she'd known him forever and said the only full sentence she'd said all afternoon. "Stay," she said. "Ethan Caldwell. Billionaire, master of markets, the man who had everything and understood nothing, looked at his daughter's small hand on his sleeve and felt the entire architecture of his old life finally completely fall away. "I'm staying," he said. "I promise. I'm never leaving again." But even as he said it, even as warmth flooded through him for the first time in years, some cold, careful part of his mind, the part that had built an empire, the part that never fully switched off, was already thinking about his mother in that car. about the phone she was surely holding, about the fact that Victoria Caldwell had just been publicly exposed for the first time in her life, and that a woman like Victoria did not survive 62 years at the top of New York society by accepting defeat. She would strike back. He was certain of it. He just didn't yet know how far she was willing to go, or that the man he thought he could trust to help him uncover the truth was already at that very moment taking a phone call from Victoria Caldwell in a parking garage across town, listening to her calm, cold voice say the words that would put this entire fragile new family in danger. "I'll double it," Victoria was saying, her hand steady, her eyes dry. "Whatever he's paying you to find the truth, I'll pay you double to bury it. And if that's not enough, then we'll discuss what happens to a woman who has no money, no lawyer, and 3 small children to protect all by herself." The investigator's name was Marcus Bell, and for 3 days he did not tell Ethan Caldwell about the phone call in the parking garage. He told himself it was because he hadn't decided yet. That was a lie, and Marcus knew it was a lie, because a man who hasn't decided doesn't lie awake at 3 in the morning doing the math on what double his fee would buy. A house with no mortgage, his daughter's college paid in full, the kind of retirement that let a man stop looking over his shoulder. Victoria Caldwell had offered him all of that in a voice as smooth as glass, and then right at the end, she had offered him something else. A reminder delivered gently that she knew where his ex-wife lived and that his own custody arrangement was, in her words, so fragile these days. So when Ethan called him that morning, Marcus almost didn't pick up. "Tell me you found something," Ethan said before Marcus had even finished saying hello. "The bank account, the one from the note. Tell me it's real." Marcus closed his eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, it's Ethan. We're past titles. You've been in my house. Did you find the account or not?" There was a long pause. "I found it," Marcus said quietly. Ethan let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for 5 years. And it was opened 5 years ago at a branch in Queens. $200,000 deposited in a single wire. Never touched. It's still sitting there gathering dust. Marcus paused. "Just like she told you." "Who opened it?" This was the moment. Marcus felt it hanging in the air, the fork in the road, the point past which there was no turning back. Double the fee, his daughter's college, or the truth. "That's the thing," Marcus said. "The account wasn't opened under Victoria Caldwell's name. It was opened by a shell company, but the shell company was set up by a lawyer, and the lawyer—" He hesitated one final time. "The lawyer has represented the Caldwell family for 30 years. His name is on your mother's Christmas card list, Ethan. I've seen it." Silence. "You have proof of that?" Ethan asked. "I have the incorporation documents. I have the wire transfer records. I have the lawyer's signature on the account. It's not a smoking gun that says Victoria Caldwell did this, but it's a chain, and every link in that chain leads to your mother's front door." Ethan's voice, when it came, was very low. "Send me everything, right now, encrypted. And Marcus, I need you to understand something. My mother is going to try to reach you. She's going to offer you money to make this disappear. She may already have." Marcus's stomach dropped. "When she does," Ethan continued, "I need to know, because I will match whatever she offers, and I will double it, and I will keep you and your family safe from her for the rest of your life. But only if you're honest with me. The moment you take her money, you become her instrument, and I will treat you like one. Do we understand each other?" Marcus sat very still. On the desk in front of him was a slip of paper with a number written on it, Victoria's private line. He'd been staring at it for 3 days. "She called me," Marcus said. 3 days ago, in a parking garage. She offered me double to bury the account." Ethan didn't sound surprised. He sounded tired. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I'd think about it." Marcus swallowed. "I've been thinking about it for 3 days. She threatened my daughter, Ethan. Not directly. She's too smart for that, but she made it clear she knows things about my life she has no business knowing." "I know exactly how she operates," Ethan said. "So I'm going to ask you one question, and your answer decides everything that happens next. Are you working for me, or are you working for her?" Marcus looked at the slip of paper, and then slowly he tore it in half. "I'm working for you," he said. "Send me a secure line. I'll have everything to you in an hour." By noon, Ethan Caldwell had sitting on his screen the first hard evidence that his mother had systematically destroyed his marriage and hidden his children from him. And he found that he could not stop shaking. He had cleared his entire schedule, canceled the merger meeting, canceled the dinner with the board. And at 8 o'clock that morning, in a 5-minute phone call that his mother would later describe to her friends as the moment my son lost his mind, he had canceled his wedding. The bride, a woman named Delia Ashford, whose family owned half the real estate on the Upper East Side, had not cried. She had in fact sounded almost relieved. "I always wondered when you'd figure it out," Delia had said. "Figure what out?" "That neither of us wanted this. Ethan, we've been engaged for 8 months, and you've never once looked at me the way a man looks at a woman he loves. I thought maybe you'd forgotten how. But something's changed, hasn't it, in the last few days? You sound different." "I found out I have children," Ethan said. There was no point hiding it. 3 of them. My mother hid them from me for 5 years. There had been a long silence on the line. "Victoria did that." Delia's voice had gone strange. "Ethan, listen to me. I've known your mother my whole life. Our families have been tangled up together for 3 generations, and I need to tell you something, and then I need you to never say you heard it from me." A breath. "There's a reason my parents pushed so hard for this marriage. Your mother made a deal with them. I don't know all the details, but I know that Victoria Caldwell doesn't do anything ever that doesn't serve some larger plan. If she hid your children, it wasn't just to protect your career. It was because those children threatened something. Money control, an inheritance, a legacy something. Find out what those triplets were going to cost her, and you'll understand why she did it." And then Delia had hung up, and Ethan had sat in his enormous silent apartment with that sentence rattling around in his skull. Find out what those triplets were going to cost her. He was still turning it over when his phone rang again. He almost didn't answer. Then he saw the number, and his heart did something complicated, and he picked up on the second ring. "Claire, they want to see you." Claire's voice was careful guarded, but underneath it, there was something he hadn't heard from her in 5 years. Not warmth exactly, but the possibility of warmth. "The children. Lucas hasn't stopped talking about you. Noah asked me 3 times last night if you were coming back or if you were a dream. And Emma keeps pointing at the door." A pause. "I told them I'd ask you. I didn't promise anything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Ethan, 15. "Ethan, stop." Her voice sharpened. "You can't just come screaming across the city every time one of them says your name. That's not how this works. They've been abandoned once already in their minds. Do you understand? For 5 years I told them their father didn't want them. Now suddenly you're here and you're wonderful and you buy them cheeseburgers and you say all the right things. And what happens the first time you have a board meeting? You can't cancel. What happens the first time your old life pulls you back? Because it will. It always does. And they will remember. Children remember everything." Ethan closed his eyes. "You're right. I know I'm right." "You're right, and I'm going to prove to you that I've changed, and the only way to do that is over time, not in a grand gesture." He took a breath. "So here's what I'd like to do if you'll let me. I'd like to come over this afternoon, not with gifts, not with anything, just me. I'd like to fix Noah's truck like I promised Lucas I would. And then I'd like to leave when you tell me to leave and come back when you tell me I can come back, and do that every day for as long as it takes for those children to believe I'm not going anywhere. And for as long as it takes for you to believe it too." There was a silence on the line so long he thought she might have hung up. "The truck's in the trash," Claire said finally, and her voice had gone thick. "I threw it out last week. It was beyond fixing. Lucas doesn't know. Then I'll bring the exact same truck brand new, and I'll dent it a little and scuff it up so it looks like the old one, and I'll tell Noah I fixed it. And he'll never know it's not the same truck. And he'll believe his daddy can fix anything." Ethan's voice cracked. "Let me do that, Claire. Please, let me be the guy who can fix the truck." He heard her breathe in. He heard her breathe out. "Come at 3, Claire said. "They nap until 3, and Ethan the same truck. Don't you dare bring something fancier. Don't turn my son's broken toy into a lesson about how rich his father is." "The exact same truck," Ethan promised. "I swear." Again, He arrived at 3 o'clock, carrying a plastic bag from a toy store, a battered green dump truck inside it, that he had in fact spent 10 minutes in the parking lot deliberately scuffing against the concrete until it looked exactly right. He had passed a limousine, a Bentley, and a private car service on the way, and had chosen instead to drive himself in the most ordinary car he owned, which was still admittedly not very ordinary. He'd parked it 3 blocks away so the children wouldn't see it. The building smelled like other people's cooking and damp carpet. The elevator was broken. A handwritten sign taped over the button said so, and Ethan climbed 4 flights of stairs to a door with a number that had lost its middle digit. He raised his hand to knock. The door flew open before his knuckles landed. "Daddy!" Lucas hit him at knee height like a small, joyful missile, wrapping both arms around Ethan's leg and holding on with the grip of a child who had decided something and was not going to be talked out of it. Behind him, Noah stood in the doorway, watching with those careful eyes, one hand gripping the doorframe. And from somewhere inside, Emma was toddling toward the sound of the commotion, arms out babbling a word that might have been daddy and might have just been happiness. Claire stood behind them, and she looked, Ethan thought, both terrified and something dangerously close to hopeful. "You came," Lucas said, tipping his head all the way back to look up at Ethan. "Mama said you might not. Mama said don't get your hopes up, but I got my hopes up anyway." Ethan crouched down. "I will always come," he said, "every single time. You never have to wonder about that again." He reached into the plastic bag and pulled out the green dump truck, and he held it out to Noah, who was still hovering in the doorway. "Lucas told me your truck broke," Ethan said gently, "so I fixed it." Noah stared at the truck. His careful eyes went wide. "That's my truck," he whispered. "I fixed it," Ethan said again. "It took me a while. It was pretty broken, but I got it working again. See?" He rolled it across the floor, and the wheels spun perfectly, and Noah watched it come to a stop against his own small foot. For a long moment, the little boy didn't move, and then Noah bent down, picked up the truck, held it against his chest with both arms, and looked up at Ethan with an expression that made something in Ethan's chest cave in entirely. "You can fix things," Noah said. It wasn't a question. It was a conclusion. A 4-year-old reorganizing his entire understanding of the world around one repaired toy. Daddies can fix things. This daddy can. Ethan said, his voice not quite steady. "Anything that breaks in this house, you bring it to me. Okay, that's my job now." Behind him, Claire made a small sound and turned away, pressing the back of her hand to her mouth. For 2 hours, Ethan Caldwell sat on the floor of a cramped Brooklyn apartment and did nothing that could be measured in dollars. He drove the green truck around the perimeter of the living room approximately 400 times, providing sound effects because Lucas insisted the sound effects were wrong when Noah did them and only right when Daddy did them. He let Emma sit in his lap and turn the pages of a picture book while he read the same 6 sentences over and over because Emma didn't want the story to move forward. She just wanted the pages to turn and turn, and Ethan discovered he could have done it for 1,000 years. He learned that Lucas was the fearless one, and Noah was the tender one, and Emma was the queen who ruled them both. He learned that they slept in one bed, all 3, because there was only one bedroom, and Claire slept on the couch. He learned that they had chicken and rice most nights because it was cheap and filling, and that Lucas had once had a birthday party with exactly 2 guests, because those were the only 2 children in his class whose parents said yes. And he learned, watching from the corner of his eye, that Claire could not sit still. She hovered. She cleaned things that were already clean. She braced herself over and over for the moment when this man would look at his watch and remember he had a billion-dollar empire to run and make his excuses and leave. He didn't leave. At 5 o'clock, Claire finally sat down across from him at the tiny kitchen table, while the children played, and she said in a low voice so they wouldn't hear, "You have to tell me what you found. I've been going out of my mind. Did you find anything about the account?" Ethan glanced at the children. Lucas was building something out of couch cushions. Emma was supervising. Noah was pushing the green truck in slow, contented circles. "Yes," Ethan said quietly. I found the account. $200,000 wired in 5 years ago, never touched. Exactly like you said. But that's not the important part. He leaned in. The account was opened by a lawyer who's worked for my family for 30 years. There's a paper trail, Claire. A chain of evidence. And every link leads back to my mother. Claire's face went pale. So it's proven. She really did it. It's proven enough that a court would take it seriously, but there's more. Ethan's jaw tightened. Delia, the woman I was going to marry, she called me back this morning. She told me something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said my mother doesn't do anything that doesn't serve a larger plan. She said if Victoria hid our children, it wasn't just about my career. It's because those 3 kids threatened something. Money, a legacy, an inheritance, something specific. He looked at Claire. So I've been asking myself all day, what were 3 grandchildren going to cost Victoria Caldwell that she was willing to destroy her own son's marriage to prevent? Claire stared at him. I don't understand. What could 3 babies possibly cost her? I don't know yet, Ethan said, but I'm going to find out. Because here's what I do know. My grandfather, my father's father, set up a trust, the Caldwell Family Trust. It's worth an enormous amount of money, and it's controlled by a set of rules he wrote himself before he died back when I was a teenager. My mother administers it. She's controlled it for 20 years. He paused. And I have never once read the actual document, not once. I trusted her to handle it. Everyone trusted her to handle it. Claire went very still. You think the trust has something to do with the children? I think, Ethan said slowly, that a man like my grandfather, a man obsessed with legacy and bloodline and the Caldwell name, might have written rules about who inherits. And I think 3 grandchildren, 3 heirs appearing out of nowhere might change who controls that money dramatically. And I think my mother knew that. He sat back. I think she didn't just hide our children to save my career, Claire. I think she hid them because they stood between her and something she was never willing to give up. The apartment suddenly felt very cold. Ethan got the trust document that same night. It took a phone call to his father's estate attorney, a different lawyer, an honest one, a man his father had trusted before he died, and a great deal of insistence. But by 10 o'clock that evening, a courier had delivered a thick sealed envelope to Ethan's apartment, and Ethan Caldwell sat alone at his desk and read for the first time in his life the actual words his grandfather had written 20 years ago. He read it twice. Then he read it a third time to be sure he wasn't imagining it. And then he sat back in his chair and he understood everything. The Caldwell Family Trust was worth $400 million. It had been set up by his grandfather, Augustus Caldwell, a man whose entire identity had been built around the continuation of the family bloodline. And Augustus, being exactly the kind of man he was, had written the trust with a single controlling condition. The bulk of the fortune, the $400 million, did not pass to Ethan directly. It passed to Ethan's children, his direct biological descendants. And until those descendants existed, the trust was administered by whoever held the position of family trustee. Victoria Caldwell was the family trustee. For 20 years, Victoria had controlled $400 million, and she had controlled it precisely because Ethan had no children. The moment Ethan produced a legitimate heir, the trust would shift. Control would begin to pass to the guardian of those children until they came of age. Victoria's 20-year reign over the Caldwell fortune, her power, her position, the source of half her influence in New York society would end. 3 grandchildren didn't threaten Victoria's plan. 3 grandchildren ended her. That's why, Ethan whispered to the empty room, that's why she couldn't let them exist. He picked up the phone and called Claire, and when she answered, sleepy and confused, he said only 4 words. I know why she did it. Victoria Caldwell was not a woman who waited to be attacked. She struck first. She always struck first. And so at 9 o'clock the next morning, before Ethan had even finished processing what the trust document meant, his mother did something that no one, not Ethan, not Claire, not Marcus Bell, had seen coming. She filed for guardianship. Ethan's phone rang, and it was his own lawyer, a man named Harold, who had worked for the family for years and who sounded genuinely shaken. Ethan, I need you to sit down. Your mother has filed an emergency petition with the family court. She's petitioning for guardianship of 3 minor children, Lucas Noah and Emma Morgan. Ethan felt the floor drop out from under him. She's claiming the children's mother is an unfit parent. Financial instability, unstable housing, working multiple jobs, and leaving the children with unlicensed caregivers, and inability to provide a stable environment. She's got photographs, Ethan. The apartment, the broken elevator, the stroller. She's built a case that this woman is neglecting 3 small children out of poverty, and she's positioning herself, the wealthy, stable grandmother, as the appropriate guardian. Harold paused. She's requesting an emergency hearing. She wants temporary custody transferred within the week. Ethan could not breathe. She's trying to take them, he said. She's trying to take my children. Legally, she has standing. If she's the grandmother and she can prove the mother is unfit, she's not unfit. Ethan was on his feet now, roaring into the phone. Claire has kept those children alive and loved and safe for 5 years, with no help from anyone, working herself to the bone, because my mother lied to her and drove her away. And now my mother wants to take them, because they're poor, because Claire is poor. A poverty my mother is directly responsible for creating. I understand you're upset. Harold. Ethan forced his voice down to something controlled and lethal. Listen to me very carefully. My mother is not doing this because she wants those children. She has never wanted those children. She hid them for 5 years. She is doing this for one reason, and one reason only, because if she controls the children, she controls the trust. Do you understand? This isn't a custody battle. This is a hostile takeover, and the asset is 3 4-year-olds. There was a long silence on the line. The trust, Harold said slowly. The Caldwell family trust, the one that passes to the grandchildren. You know about it. Everyone in estate law in this city knows about the Caldwell Trust, Ethan. $400 million in escrow for 20 years, controlled by a trustee waiting for an heir. Harold's voice had changed entirely. If Victoria becomes the legal guardian of those children, she becomes the administrator of that trust on their behalf until they're of age. She keeps control, for another 14 years at least. She keeps everything. Now you understand, Ethan said grimly. Now you understand what we're actually fighting. He drove to Claire's apartment because he could not bear to tell her over the phone. She opened the door with Emma on her hip and took one look at his face and went white. What? She said. What is it? What's wrong? Ethan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The children were watching cartoons on a cracked tablet propped against the couch. He lowered his voice. My mother filed for guardianship this morning, he said, of the triplets. She's petitioning the court to take custody of the children away from you. She's calling you an unfit mother. She has photographs of the apartment, the stroller, everything. She wants an emergency hearing this week. Claire's legs went out from under her. Ethan caught her and Emma, and the 3 of them sank onto the couch together, while the children, oblivious, laughed at their cartoon. She can't, Claire whispered. She can't do that. They're my children. She can't just take them. She can try, Ethan said. She has money, she has lawyers, she has standing as the grandmother, and she has a case built on the fact that you're poor. A poverty she caused. That's the part that's going to make me burn her whole world down, Claire. She spent 5 years forcing you into poverty by hiding you from your children's father, and now she's using that same poverty as the reason to take them from you. I'll lose them, Claire was shaking. A rich grandmother versus a broke single mother with 3 jobs, Ethan, I'll lose. Judges take one look at me and they see someone drowning. I'll lose my babies. No. Ethan took her face in his hands, and it was the first time he had touched her like that in 5 years, and neither of them noticed until it was already happening. Listen to me. You will not lose them, because you are not a broke single mother with 3 jobs anymore. You have me. You have every resource I have ever built. You have the best lawyers in this city who work for you starting today. And most of all, Claire, look at me. You have the truth. You have the trust document. You have the bank account. You have the paper trail that proves my mother is not a concerned grandmother. She is a woman who hid these children for 5 years and is only surfacing now because they threaten her control of $400 million. When that comes out in a courtroom, she doesn't just lose the case, she's finished. Forever. Claire was staring at him. 400 million, she repeated. That's Ethan. That's what this is about. That's the number. That's the number my mother decided your children were worth destroying, Ethan said quietly, and I am going to make her regret every cent of it. But Victoria Caldwell had one more card, and she played it that same afternoon, and it was the cruelest thing she had ever done. Marcus Bell called Ethan at 2 o'clock. I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you fast, because I think your mother's people are already moving on it. Marcus's voice was tight. I've been digging into Claire's background because I figured your mother's lawyers would too, and I wanted to know what they'd find before they found it. And Ethan, there's something in Claire's history. Something from before she met you, and your mother knows about it. Ethan's blood ran cold. What is it? When Claire was 19 before she ever met you, she was arrested. Once. A single charge. It was dropped, never prosecuted, expunged years ago. But your mother's investigators dug it up, and they're going to use it, and in a custody hearing, they're going to make it sound like the worst thing in the world. What was the charge? Marcus took a breath. Child endangerment. Ethan felt the room tilt. It's not what it sounds like, Marcus said quickly. Ethan, listen to the whole thing before you react. When Claire was 19, she was the legal guardian of her younger sister. Their parents had died in a car accident. Claire was raising a 12-year-old girl by herself, working 2 jobs, barely surviving. One night she left her sister home alone to cover a shift, and there was a small kitchen fire and a neighbor called the police, and Claire got charged with child endangerment for leaving a minor unsupervised. The charge was dropped within a month. The judge who reviewed it said it was a case of poverty, not neglect, and expunged the whole thing. Claire's sister was never harmed. She grew up fine. She's a nurse now, actually, out in California. Ethan closed his eyes. But your mother's lawyers, Marcus continued, are going to stand up in that courtroom and say, Claire Morgan has a history of endangering the children in her care. They're going to say she has a criminal record for child endangerment. Technically true. And they're going to use it to prove she can't be trusted with 3 4-year-olds. Ethan sat down slowly. She raised her orphaned little sister at 19, he said almost to himself, by herself, with nothing, and my mother is going to use that against her. Yeah, Marcus said quietly, that's exactly what your mother is going to do. Ethan was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It had gone very calm and very cold and very certain, the voice of a man who has stopped being afraid and started being dangerous. Marcus, he said, I need you to find Claire's sister, the nurse in California. I need everything about her, how Claire raised her, what kind of person she turned out to be, whether she'll testify. Because my mother wants to tell a story about a 19-year-old who endangered a child, and I want to tell the real story about a 19-year-old orphan who gave up her entire youth to raise her little sister into a nurse who saves lives. Same facts, completely different story. And when a jury hears the real one, they're going to see exactly what my mother is, a woman who takes the most heroic thing a person ever did and twists it into a weapon. You want to fight fire with fire. No, Ethan said. I want to fight fire with the truth. My mother has spent her whole life believing that money and lawyers and clever lies always win. She's about to find out she was wrong. He stood up. Send me the sister's contact information. I'm flying to California tomorrow. Ekem. He did not tell Claire about the arrest, not because he wanted to hide it from her, but because he understood with a clarity that surprised him that this was hers to tell. So instead, that evening, he went back to the apartment, and after the children were asleep, all 3 in the one bed, the green truck tucked under Noah's arm, he sat with Claire at the kitchen table, and he said gently, I need to ask you about your sister. Claire's whole body went rigid. How do you know about my sister? I know you raised her. After your parents died, I know you were 19. Ethan chose his words carefully. And I know there was a night and a kitchen fire and a charge that got dropped. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Your mother found it, she said dully. Of course she found it. She'll use it, won't she? She'll stand up in court and tell everyone I'm a woman who endangers children. Yes, Ethan said honestly, she will. Claire put her face in her hands. I was 19, she whispered. Rachel was 12. Our parents had just died. I had a choice. I could let Rachel go into foster care, into the system where they'd have split us up, and I'd never have seen her again. Or I could quit school and take custody and work 2 jobs and try to keep us together. So I kept us together. And one night I had to cover a shift because we were about to lose the apartment, and I left Rachel home alone because I couldn't afford a babysitter, because I couldn't afford anything. And she tried to make herself dinner and a dish towel caught fire, and she put it out herself. She was fine. She was completely fine. But a neighbor called the police, and suddenly I was a criminal. Her voice broke. I was trying to keep my family together, and they treated me like I was a danger to my own sister. And now your mother is going to use the worst night of my life to take my children away from me. Ethan reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "Where is Rachel now?" he asked softly. Claire looked up, confused by the question. "California. She's a nurse. In the ICU. She saves people's lives every day." A ghost of pride flickered through her grief. "She graduated top of her nursing class. She sends me money sometimes when she can, even though I always tell her not to. She's the best thing I ever did. She's the whole reason I know I can be a good mother, because I already raised one child who turned out—" Claire stopped hearing herself. "Oh," she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "Oh, you want her to testify?" "I want the world to hear the real story," Ethan said. "My mother wants to tell a courtroom about a criminal who endangered a child. I want to put Rachel Morgan on the stand, an ICU nurse who saves lives, who was raised by her big sister after their parents died, who will look a judge in the eye and say the only reason she's alive and whole and helping people today is because at 19 years old, Claire gave up everything to keep her out of the system. Same night, same fire, same facts. But one version is a crime, and the other version is the most heroic thing I've ever heard, and they are the exact same story." He squeezed her hands. "Claire, my mother thinks she found your weakness. She didn't. She found your greatest strength, and she was too twisted to recognize it. Let me show the whole world what she couldn't see." Claire was crying, but she was also for the first time looking at him with something that was no longer just wariness. It was something closer to belief. "You'd do that," she said. "You'd fly across the country, you'd fight your own mother, you'd risk your whole reputation, all of it. For you and those children," Ethan said. "Claire, there is nothing I wouldn't do. There is no line I won't cross. My mother spent 5 years teaching me that family was a liability. She was wrong. Family is the only thing that was ever real, and she is not going to take it from me a second time." The hearing was set for Friday, but Victoria Caldwell requested a meeting first, a private meeting, mother and son, to resolve this like family before it destroys us all in public. And Ethan, against the advice of every lawyer, he had agreed to it, because he wanted to look his mother in the eye one time before he took everything from her, and he wanted her to understand exactly why. She received him in the sitting room of the townhouse he'd grown up in, poured him tea he didn't touch, and got straight to the point. "This is very simple, Ethan," Victoria said. "Drop your support for that woman. Let me become the guardian of the children, and I will raise them as Caldwells. Properly, with every advantage. They'll never want for anything. You can see them whenever you like. And the trust stays managed by someone who actually knows how to manage $400 million instead of being handed to a diner waitress from Brooklyn." She sipped her tea. "Everyone wins. The family stays intact. The scandal disappears, and in 20 years when the children inherit, they'll thank us both for keeping the money safe." Ethan looked at his mother for a long time. "You still don't understand," he said finally. "Even now, even after everything, you think this is about the money." "Everything is about the money, darling. That's the one lesson your father never learned, and it's why he died with less than he should have." "You hid my children," Ethan said quietly. "You forged photographs. You wrote a note designed to make a pregnant woman flee her own home. You forced my wife into 5 years of poverty. You watched 3 of your own grandchildren grow up hungry in a 1-bedroom apartment, and you knew the entire time, and you did nothing. And now you want to take them, not because you love them, not because you've ever spent 1 minute loving them, but because they're worth $400 million. He leaned forward. You are not going to raise my children, Mother. You are never going to be alone in a room with them, because I finally see you clearly, and what I see is a woman who looked at 3 innocent babies and saw an inconvenience with a price tag. Victoria's face hardened. You ungrateful— I found the trust document, Ethan said. Victoria went still. I read every word. I know what happens the moment those children are legally recognized as my heirs. I know your 20-year control of the fortune ends the day they exist in the eyes of the law. I know exactly why you did what you did, and it was never about my career, and it was never about protecting me. It was about protecting your grip on $400 million. He stood up. And I have the evidence, the account, the lawyer, the paper trail, all of it. So here is what's going to happen at that hearing on Friday, Mother. You are going to withdraw your petition. You are going to sign away your position as trustee. And you are going to disappear from this family's life quietly with your name intact, because I am giving you that one mercy for the sake of the fact that you are God. Help me still my mother. And if I don't, then I put all of it in front of a judge, Ethan said. The photographs you faked, the note you wrote, the $200,000 you wired to make my pregnant wife vanish, the trust you've been protecting. I put your investigator's threats to my investigator on the record. I put Rachel Morgan on the stand to destroy your child endangerment lie. And when I'm done, you don't just lose custody, Mother, you lose your freedom. Because forging documents and financial fraud and conspiring to conceal children are crimes. And I will spend every dollar I have making sure you answer for every single one of them. He walked to the door and stopped. You have until Friday morning to decide whether you leave this family as a disgraced woman or a convicted one. Choose wisely. It's the last choice about this family you'll ever get to make. He left her sitting there in the townhouse where she had ruled unchallenged for 40 years, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold, and for the first time in Ethan Caldwell's entire life, his mother did not have anything to say. He drove straight to Claire's apartment. She opened the door, and she must have seen it in his face because she said, "You saw her. You saw your mother." "I gave her a choice," Ethan said. "Withdraw the petition or I bury her. She'll withdraw. She has no move left. The trust document changes everything. It proves motive. It proves she's not a loving grandmother. It proves this whole thing was about money from the start." And Rachel agreed to testify. "I spoke to her this afternoon. She's flying in tomorrow." He stepped inside. "Claire, I think we're going to win. I think we're actually going to win." Claire's hand flew to her mouth. And then from the bedroom, a small voice called out, "Mama, is Daddy here?" It was Lucas. And before Claire could answer, all 3 of them came stumbling out in their pajamas, hair sticking up, blinking in the light. And Lucas launched himself across the room, and Ethan caught him, and Noah followed with the green truck still clutched in one hand, and Emma toddled behind, demanding to be picked up. And Ethan Caldwell knelt on the floor of that cramped apartment with all 3 of his children in his arms. "Are you going to live with us now?" Lucas asked, his face buried in Ethan's shoulder. "Tommy's daddy lives with Tommy. Can you live with us?" Ethan looked up at Claire over the tops of their children's heads. And Claire, who had spent 5 years hating him, 5 years believing he'd thrown them away, 5 years crying alone in a bathroom so the children wouldn't hear. Claire looked back at him, and something in her face finally cautiously began to let go. "We'll see," Claire said softly to Lucas, but she was looking at Ethan when she said it. "We'll see, baby. One thing at a time. First we get through Friday, and then—" Her voice caught. "And then we see." Ethan held his children tighter, and he thought about Friday, and he thought about his mother sitting alone in that townhouse with her cold tea, and some part of him, the part that had built an empire, the part that knew Victoria Caldwell better than anyone alive, understood that his mother had not in fact run out of moves. She had simply gone quiet. And Victoria Caldwell was never more dangerous than when she went quiet. Because at that very moment across the city, Victoria was not signing away anything. She was sitting at her late husband's desk, and she was making a phone call, and the person on the other end of the line was not a lawyer. It was a woman Claire had trusted once a long time ago. The one person from Claire's past who knew a secret that not even Ethan had uncovered yet. A secret about the night of the fire. A secret about Rachel. A secret that if it came out on that witness stand on Friday would not destroy Victoria at all. It would destroy Claire. The woman on the other end of Victoria's phone call was named Diane Foster, and she had once been Claire's neighbor on the night of the fire. She was also, though Claire didn't know it, the neighbor who had called the police. "I want you to think very carefully about what I'm offering you," Victoria said, her voice smooth as silk. "You witnessed something that night, Diane. Something you told the police, and something you've never told anyone since. And it just so happens that what you witnessed is worth a great deal of money to me right now. All you have to do is take a stand on Friday and tell the truth. Nothing more. The truth under oath. And your mortgage, the one you're 4 months behind on, vanishes. Are we understanding each other?" There was a long silence on the line. "It'll ruin her," Diane said quietly. "If I say what I saw that night, it'll ruin Claire, and she was just a kid. She was trying so hard." "Claire Morgan," Victoria said coldly, "is trying to steal $400 million from my family. Whatever pity you have for her, I suggest you weigh it against your own children who will be sleeping in a car by spring if you don't make your payments. Friday, Diane. The courthouse, 9 o'clock. My lawyer will find you." And she hung up before Diane could answer. Victoria set down the phone and she smiled for the first time in 3 days. Her son thought he had cornered her. Her son thought the trust document was checkmate. Her son had no idea that the very witness he was flying across the country to lionize Rachel Morgan, the heroic little sister the nurse carried inside her, a truth that would turn Ethan's beautiful courtroom story into a bomb aimed directly at Claire. Because Rachel Morgan had never known the whole truth about the night of the fire, but Diane Foster had. Ethan flew to California the next morning, and he met Rachel Morgan in the cafeteria of the hospital where she worked, and the moment he saw her, he understood that Claire had told the truth about everything. Rachel was 24 now, in blue scrubs, with the same dark eyes as her sister, and the same tired but unbroken quality to her, the look of someone who had learned early that the world was hard and had decided to be gentle anyway. She sat down across from Ethan with a cup of vending machine coffee, and she looked at him with open suspicion. "So you're him," Rachel said. "You're the husband, the one who disappeared, the one who left my sister pregnant and alone to raise 3 kids in a hole in the wall while you flew around on private jets." "Yes," Ethan said. "That's what everyone believed, including me in a way." And then he told her. All of it. The restaurant, the lie, the photographs, his mother, the trust. Rachel listened without moving, her coffee going cold, and when Ethan finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You want me to testify," Rachel said finally. "You want me to get up in front of a judge and tell them Claire raised me right, that the fire wasn't her fault, that she was a good guardian." "I want you to tell the truth," Ethan said. "That's all. My mother is going to stand up in that courtroom and say your sister has a criminal record for child endangerment, which is technically true. And I want the judge to hear what that record actually means, that a 19-year-old orphan gave up her whole life to keep her 12-year-old sister out of foster care, and that the sister grew up to save lives in an ICU. Same facts, different story." Rachel stared into her coffee. "There's something you don't know," she said quietly, "about that night." Ethan went very still. "What?" Rachel's hands had begun to tremble around the cup. "Claire's always told the story one way, the way that protects me. She says she left me home alone to cover a shift, and I tried to cook, and a towel caught fire, and I put it out. That's the version she tells. That's the version she told the police." Rachel looked up, and her eyes were wet. "But that's not what happened. That's the version Claire built to protect me, and she's told it so many times over the years. I think she almost believes it herself. But I was there, and I remember." Ethan's heart was pounding. "Rachel, what actually happened that night?" "The fire wasn't an accident," Rachel whispered, "and it wasn't me trying to cook." 3,000 miles away in the cramped Brooklyn apartment, Claire was folding the children's laundry when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. But something made her. "Claire," the voice on the line was hesitant, guilty. "Claire, it's Diane Foster, from the old building on Crest Street. Do you remember me?" Claire's blood turned to ice. She had not heard that name in 12 years. Diane Foster. The neighbor, the one who had called the police the night of the fire, the reason a 19-year-old girl had ended up in a holding cell with a child endangerment charge on her record. What do you want? Claire said flatly. I'm so sorry to call you like this. I got your number from it doesn't matter how I got it. Diane's voice cracked. Claire, a woman contacted me. A rich woman. Victoria Caldwell. She wants me to testify on Friday. About that night. She's offering to pay my mortgage. And I said I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. And now I can't sleep. And I had to warn you because Claire... A shaking breath. She knows. Somehow she knows what really happened that night. Not the story you told. What actually happened. And she's going to make me say it under oath. Claire sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. In the next room, Lucas was building a tower, and Emma was knocking it down, and Noah was refereeing, and their laughter came through the wall like sound from another world. You wouldn't, Claire whispered. Diane, you couldn't. It would destroy me. It would destroy everything. Rachel doesn't even... Her voice failed. Rachel doesn't even know the whole truth. I protected her from it for 12 years. If it comes out now in a courtroom... I know, Diane said miserably. I know Claire. That's why I'm calling. I don't want to do it, but she threatened my kids. She threatened to put my kids on the street, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Claire closed her eyes, and she understood with a cold and terrible clarity that Victoria Caldwell had found the one thing Ethan's money and Ethan's lawyers and Ethan's evidence could not protect her from. The truth about the night of the fire. Don't do anything, Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, just don't do anything until I've had a chance to think. Please, Diane, give me until tomorrow. She hung up. And then Claire Morgan sat alone on her broken couch, listening to her children laugh in the next room, and she began very quietly to fall apart. Back in the hospital cafeteria, Rachel was still talking, and every word out of her mouth was reshaping the ground beneath Ethan's feet. Our father wasn't a good man, Rachel said, her voice flat and careful, the voice of someone reciting something they've buried very deep. By the end, he drank. After Mom got sick, he drank all the time. And when he drank, he got mean. Claire took the worst of it. She always put herself between me and him. Always. From the time I was little. Rachel wiped her eyes. The car accident that killed our parents, that's the story. Mom and Dad died in a car accident. That's what everyone was told. That's what's on the death certificates. Single car accident, icy road, tragic. But Ethan... She stopped. Rachel, Ethan's voice was gentle. What are you telling me? The night of the fire, Rachel said, wasn't a year after our parents died. It was 3 weeks after, and it wasn't a dish towel. She was crying openly now. Our father didn't die in that car accident, Ethan. Our mother did. She was already gone, but our father survived. He was in the hospital, and then he came home, and he was worse than ever, because now he blamed us, blamed Claire for surviving when Mom didn't. And that night, the night of the fire... She could barely get the words out. He came home drunk and he went after me, 12 years old. He had his hands around my throat. And Claire... A sob tore out of her. Claire hit him with a pan to get him off me, and a candle got knocked over in the fight, and the curtains caught, and there was a fire, and Claire got me out of the apartment and then went back in for him. She saved his life, Ethan. The man who was strangling her little sister, and she went back into a burning apartment and dragged him out. That's the night. That's what really happened. Ethan could not breathe. So when the neighbor called the police, Rachel continued, and they showed up, there was a burning apartment and a beaten-up drunk man and 2 terrified girls and a 19-year-old covered in soot with a frying pan. And Claire made a choice in about 4 seconds flat. She told them she'd left me home alone and I'd started a cooking fire. She took the whole thing on herself, child endangerment, because the alternative was telling them the truth that she'd assaulted our father, and if she'd done that, they'd have taken me. They'd have taken me away from her and put me in the system, and I'd have gone to live with the only remaining relative we had, which was our father's brother, who was exactly like our father. Rachel's voice broke completely. So she lied. She took a criminal charge. She took the child endangerment record. She took all of it to keep me. And she never told me the truth. I only figured it out years later in pieces. She still thinks I don't fully know. She still protects me from it. Ethan sat in that cafeteria with the ruins of his beautiful courtroom strategy scattered around him, and he understood at last exactly what his mother had found. "My God," he whispered. "Claire didn't endanger a child. She stopped a child from being strangled, and she buried the truth so deep to protect you that now if it comes out the wrong way," Rachel said, "it doesn't look like heroism. It looks like a woman who assaulted her own father and burned down an apartment with a child inside and lied to the police about all of it, depending on who tells the story, depending on who's paying the witness." She grabbed Ethan's hand across the table. "Your mother isn't going to say Claire endangered a child. That's the version we could beat. Your mother is going to bring in a witness who saw what really happened that night, and she's going to tell it as an assault. Violence, arson, deception. She's going to make my sister look like a violent liar who's been hiding a criminal past for 12 years. And Ethan..." Rachel's grip tightened. "The worst part is all the facts are true. She did hit him. There was a fire. She did lie to the police. Every single fact your mother needs is real. It's only the meaning that's a lie." "Shah." Ethan called Claire from the airport, and she picked up on the first ring, and before he could say a word, she said, "You know, Rachel told you. I can hear it in your breathing. You know about the fire." "Claire." "Then you also know I can't win." Her voice was hollow, defeated in a way he had never heard from her. "You know what your mother has. And you know that every fact of it is true, and there's no lawyer alive who can make hitting my own father and lying to the police and starting a fire look good in a custody hearing. I've been sitting here for 2 hours doing the math, Ethan. There's no version of Friday where I keep my children. If that comes out, I lose them. And it's going to come out because your mother found the one neighbor who saw everything." Ethan's whole body went cold. "What neighbor?" "Diane Foster. She called me an hour ago. Your mother's paying her mortgage to testify. Diane saw the whole thing that night through the window. The fight, the fire, all of it. She's the one who called the police, and your mother has her." Claire's voice cracked. "So it doesn't matter how much money you have or how good your lawyers are. Victoria found the one piece of my past that can't be spun, and she's going to use it, and I'm going to lose my babies. So maybe..." A terrible pause. "Maybe I should just give up now. Maybe I should let her have..." "Don't!" Ethan's voice came out like a whip. "Don't you dare finish that sentence, Claire. Don't you dare. Ethan, I can't win. You keep saying the facts can't be spun. You're wrong. My mother is going to tell those facts as a crime. We're going to tell them as the truth. And here's the difference, Claire. Here's the thing my mother, in all her cleverness, has never once understood." Ethan's voice dropped fierce and certain. "The truth has a witness she can't buy. Not Diane Foster. Rachel, the little girl whose life you saved. My mother wants to put a neighbor on the stand who saw a fight through a window 12 years ago. And I'm going to put your sister on the stand, the child you saved, the woman who's alive today because of what you did that night, and I'm going to let her tell the world what actually happened. Diane Foster saw a fire. Rachel Morgan lived it. Whose testimony do you think a judge believes?" There was a long, shaking silence on the line. "Rachel doesn't want anyone to know," Claire whispered. "Ethan, I spent 12 years protecting her from having to relive that night. I can't ask her to get up in a courtroom and..." "You don't have to ask her," Ethan said quietly. "She already offered. She sat across from me an hour ago and she said, and I'm quoting her exactly, 'My sister spent her whole life protecting me from the truth. Let me spend one afternoon telling it so it finally protects her instead.'" Claire made a sound that was half sob, half something Ethan had not heard from her in 5 years. Hope. She said that. "Oh, God!" Claire was crying now. "Ethan, I've spent 12 years thinking that night was the worst thing I ever did. My shameful secret, the thing I could never let anyone see. And you're telling me it might be the thing that saves my children." "I'm telling you," Ethan said, "that my mother keeps making the same mistake over and over. She looks at the bravest, most loving things you've ever done, and because she has no love in her, she can only see them as weaknesses to exploit. She looked at you raising Rachel and saw a criminal record. She looked at you saving a child from being strangled and saw an assault charge. She has no idea, none, that she keeps handing me your finest moments and calling them ammunition. And on Friday, I'm going to hand every single one of them right back to her in front of a judge as exactly what they are." He paused. "You are not a woman with a shameful past, Claire. You are the bravest person I have ever met. And it's about time somebody made you believe it." Chum. But Victoria had anticipated even this, because when Ethan landed back in New York that night and drove to Claire's apartment, Marcus Bell was waiting for him in the parking lot, and Marcus's face told him something had gone wrong before Marcus said a single word. "Your mother got to Rachel," Marcus said. Ethan's stomach dropped. "What?" "Not to buy her, to scare her. Your mother's people found out you met with Rachel this morning. I don't know how they're watching everyone, and 2 hours ago Rachel got served. A subpoena. But not from us. From your mother's team." Marcus handed over a document. "Victoria is calling Rachel as a hostile witness, which means Rachel can't just tell her story the way she wants to. She's going to be cross-examined by your mother's lawyers first, and they are very, very good at what they do. They're going to walk Rachel through that night fact by fact, out of order, out of context, and get her to confirm under oath one damning admission at a time. Did your sister strike your father? Yes. Was there a fire? Yes. Did your sister lie to the police? Yes. And by the time our lawyers get to ask Rachel the questions that give it meaning, the damage is already done. Your mother doesn't need Diane Foster anymore, Ethan. She's going to make your own witness destroy your case." Ethan stared at the subpoena in his hands. "She turned my witness into her weapon," he said slowly. "That's what she does," Marcus said grimly. "You told me yourself. She takes the thing you love and makes it hurt you. She's going to take the sister Claire saved and use her to take Claire's children." Ethan stood in that parking lot for a long moment, the subpoena crumpling slowly in his fist, and something was happening behind his eyes. The cold, methodical thing that had built an empire, the part of him that had spent 20 years learning from the best and cruelest teacher alive exactly how to win. "No," Ethan said finally. "She's made a mistake." "Ethan." "She's made a mistake, Marcus, and it's the same mistake she always makes. She thinks she understands people. She doesn't. She understands leverage. She understands fear and money and control, but she has never once in her life understood love, and that's why she keeps losing to it without even realizing it's in the room." He looked up. "She thinks putting Rachel on the stand as a hostile witness is checkmate. She thinks she'll control the questions. But she's forgotten something. Rachel isn't hostile to Claire. Rachel loves Claire, and there is no cross-examination in the world that can make a woman betray the sister who saved her life, no matter how the questions are ordered. My mother is about to put a loaded gun in her own hand and point it at herself, and she doesn't even know it." "You're sure about that?" "No," Ethan admitted. "I'm not sure. That's the terrifying part. But I know one thing my mother doesn't. I know what it feels like to finally choose love over her. And I'm betting everything my children, Claire, all of it, that Rachel knows that feeling too." He didn't tell Claire about the hostile witness subpoena that night. He should have. And later, he'd wish he had. But when he walked into that apartment and Emma ran to him with her arms up, and Lucas showed him a drawing, and Noah wordlessly handed him the green truck to inspect, he found he couldn't bring himself to bring the darkness in with him. So he held his children, and he ate chicken and rice at the tiny table, and he watched Claire move around the small kitchen, and for 1 hour he let himself pretend that Friday wasn't coming. But after the children were asleep, Claire looked at him across the table and said, "Something's wrong. You've been off all night. What aren't you telling me?" Ethan had never been good at lying to her. He'd been good at a lot of terrible things, but not that. "My mother subpoenaed Rachel," he said quietly, "as a hostile witness. Her lawyers get to question Rachel first. They're going to try to walk her through that night fact by fact and make it sound like a crime before we ever get to tell the truth." Claire's face went white. "So Rachel has to relive the worst night of her life on the stand being torn apart by your mother's lawyers, and there's a chance they twist it so badly that it hurts us instead of helping." She stood up, pacing, her hands pressed to her mouth. "Ethan, I can't do that to her. I spent 12 years making sure she never had to talk about that night, and now I'm going to sit in a courtroom and watch strangers use it to hurt her, to hurt all of us. No, there has to be another way. Claire, what if I take a deal? Claire turned to him desperate. What if I go to your mother tonight and I offer her something? I sign away any claim to the trust, all of it. $400 million, I renounce it. I put it in writing the children never touch a cent of it. Then she has no reason to take them, right? Because it was never about the children, it was about the money. If I give her the money, she has no reason to fight me for the kids. Ethan was already shaking his head. It won't work. Why not? Because you can't renounce it. The trust doesn't pass to you. It passes to the children directly by my grandfather's design, and they can't renounce anything until they're 18. As long as they're minors, the money passes through their guardian. And that's exactly the point. My mother doesn't want the money handed to her. She wants to be the guardian who controls it. There's no piece of paper you can sign that gives her what she wants, except the guardianship itself. She doesn't want a check, Claire. She wants the children, because the children are the check. Claire sank back into her chair, all the fight going out of her. Then we're trapped, she whispered. Either I fight and Rachel gets torn apart on the stand and we might still lose, or I give up and I hand my babies to the woman who destroyed our whole family. She looked up at him, and her eyes were hollow. Ethan, tell me the truth. Not the hopeful version, the real one. What are our actual chances on Friday? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, because he had promised her from the beginning that he would never lie to her again. I don't know, he said. That's the honest answer. If Rachel holds up on that stand, if she can survive the cross-examination and still tell the truth, then I think we win, and I think we win big enough to end my mother forever. But if she breaks, if my mother's lawyers rattle her badly enough that the story comes out wrong. He stopped. Then it's a real fight, Claire. A coin flip. And I've never in my life gambled with something I couldn't afford to lose, and now I'm gambling with the only 3 things I've ever actually wanted. Claire reached across the table and took his hand. You're scared, she said. It wasn't an accusation, it was almost tender. I'm terrified, Ethan admitted. I've closed billion-dollar deals without my pulse changing, and right now I'm sitting in a kitchen the size of a closet, more frightened than I've ever been in my life, because for the first time there's actually something to lose. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped across the table, 2 people who had once loved each other and been driven apart by a lie, and were now cautiously in the middle of the worst crisis of their lives, finding their way back to something. And then Claire said something that changed the shape of everything. There's one thing you don't know, she said slowly. One thing I never told anyone. Not you, not Rachel, not the police, not in 12 years. She took a breath. I have proof, Ethan. Proof of what really happened that night. Ethan went completely still. What? That night after I got Rachel and my father out of the burning apartment before the police came, I don't know why I did it. I was in shock. I wasn't thinking straight. I took photos on the disposable camera we had of Rachel's neck, the bruises. My father's hands had left marks on my little sister's throat, and some part of me, some animal part, knew I needed to remember why I did what I did. I took photos of the bruises, and then I hid the camera, and I told the story I told, and I served my time on the endangerment charge, and I never developed the film. For 12 years, Claire's voice was shaking. I have it in a box, in the closet. A disposable camera with photographs of the strangulation marks on my 12-year-old sister's neck, taken the same night your mother wants to call me a criminal. I never developed it because I never wanted to see it. But it's there, Ethan. It's proof. Undeveloped 12 years old, but proof. Ethan stared at her, and slowly, a light was coming into his eyes. Claire, he said carefully, do you understand what that is? It's the worst night of my life on a roll of film I could never bring myself to look at. No. Ethan stood up. It's evidence. Physical, datable forensic evidence taken the night of the fire that proves your father had his hands around a child's throat. It corroborates Rachel's testimony completely. It turns her story from her word against my mother's spin into documented, provable fact. Claire, if that film shows what you say, it shows, then my mother's whole strategy doesn't just fail. It detonates. in her hands, because she's about to stand up in a courtroom and call you a violent criminal, and we're going to show a judge photographic proof that you were a 19-year-old girl saving her little sister from being strangled to death. He was already reaching for his phone. Where's the camera right now? Where is it? The closet. The box on the top shelf. But Ethan, the film's 12 years old. There's no guarantee it developed. There's no guarantee the images survived. Then we find out tonight, Ethan said. I know a forensic lab that owes me a favor. They can develop and authenticate a 12-year-old disposable in a matter of hours, and they can date the film stock and verify it hasn't been tampered with. If those images are on there, Claire, if they show what you say they show... He grabbed her hands. Then Friday isn't a coin flip anymore. Friday is the day my mother destroys herself in open court, and everyone in that room finally sees exactly who each of you really is. Claire ran to the closet. And there on the top shelf behind a box of the children's outgrown clothes was a smaller box she hadn't opened in 12 years. Inside it, wrapped in a dishcloth, was a cheap yellow disposable camera. Its film, Advance, frozen at exposure 11 of 24. A small object that held inside it the single truth Claire had spent her whole adult life running from. She handed it to Ethan with shaking hands. If it comes out, she whispered, Rachel finds out I have this. She finds out I've been carrying photographs of the worst night of her life for 12 years. She finds out how bad it really was, because she was only 12 and she doesn't remember all of it, and I've spent her whole life making sure she never had to. Ethan, this could break her. Ethan cupped the camera in both hands like it was made of glass. Or, he said quietly, it could finally set both of you free. 12 years, Claire. You've been carrying this alone for 12 years. Let me carry it now. Let me take it to people who can turn it from the thing that haunts you into the thing that saves your children. Trust me. Please. Just this once, let someone else carry the heavy thing. And Claire Morgan, who had carried heavy things alone since she was 19 years old, looked at this man she had spent 5 years hating and was now against all odds beginning to trust, and she let go of the camera. Okay, she whispered. Okay, take it. The forensic lab worked through the night. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in a waiting room drinking terrible coffee, while a technician named Sarah, who did in fact owe him a considerable favor, carefully developed a roll of film that had been frozen in a cheap camera for 12 years. At 4 a.m, she came out to find him, and her face was grave. Most of the roll is gone, Sarah said. Degraded past recovery. 12 years in a hot closet does terrible things to undeveloped film. She paused. But 3 exposures survived. 11, 12, and 13. They're damaged, but they're readable. And Mr. Caldwell... She hesitated. I've been doing this for 20 years, and these are hard to look at. You should prepare yourself. She laid 3 photographs on the table. Ethan looked at them, and he felt something cold and clean and absolute settle into his chest. The images were grainy, degraded at the edges, 12 years old. But they were unmistakable. A child's neck, a little girl, maybe 12, and around her throat, livid and terrible, the clear, dark, finger-shaped bruises of a grown man's hands. Can you date them? Ethan asked quietly. Can you prove when they were taken? Can you prove they haven't been altered? The film stock has a manufacturing code. It was made and sold in a window that matches your timeline exactly. The degradation pattern is consistent with 12 years of storage. You can't fake that it's chemistry. And digital forensics confirms no manipulation because there was never any digital file to manipulate. This is film Mr. Caldwell, original physical chemical film. Sarah met his eyes. In my professional opinion, these photographs were taken on the date you've described. They have not been altered, and they show exactly what they appear to show. I'll testify to it under oath if you need me to. Ethan looked at the photographs of the child his wife had saved, and then he pulled out his phone and called his lead attorney, and he woke the man up and he said in a voice that was perfectly calm and perfectly cold, cancel the settlement discussions, all of them. We're not settling anything. On Friday, we're going to court, and we're going to end this permanently. Friday came. Claire barely slept. Ethan barely slept. Rachel had flown in the night before and stayed at the apartment, and the three of them had sat up until 2 in the morning, and Ethan had made the decision with Claire's permission to tell Rachel about the photographs before she took the stand, because a witness ambushed by her own history breaks, but a witness who knows what's coming holds. And Rachel, when she saw the photographs of her own 12-year-old neck, had gone very quiet for a long time. And then she had looked up at her big sister, who was crying, waiting to be forgiven for having carried this alone for 12 years. And Rachel had said the thing that Claire would remember for the rest of her life. "You went back into the fire for him," Rachel said softly, "for the man who did this to me. You could have let him burn and no one would have ever known, and you saved his life anyway. And then you took the blame for all of it, and you carried these pictures alone for 12 years so I'd never have to see them." She stood up and crossed the room and put her arms around her sister. "You've spent your whole life protecting me, Claire. Let me protect you for one day. Let me get on that stand tomorrow and tell the world exactly who you are." The courtroom on Friday morning was fuller than a custody hearing should have been. Victoria had made calls. There were society reporters in the back rows there to watch the great Ethan Caldwell's private disaster, there to watch a diner waitress lose her children to a Caldwell matriarch, as everyone assumed she would. Victoria arrived in a coat that cost more than Claire's yearly rent, serene, and certain a woman who had never lost anything in her life. She did not look at Claire. She did not look at the children who were not in the courtroom. She looked only at Ethan once with an expression that said very clearly, "You could have avoided this." And then she took her seat, confident, composed, waiting to win. Her lawyer called Rachel Morgan to the stand as a hostile witness, and Ethan watched his mother's lawyer, a sleek and expensive man named Prentice, rise with the easy confidence of a predator and begin to walk Rachel Morgan toward the trap. "Ms. Morgan," Prentice began smoothly, "you were raised by your sister, the respondent, after your parents' deaths. Is that correct?" "Yes," Rachel said. "And you were in her care on the night of a fire 12 years ago, a fire that resulted in your sister being charged with child endangerment. Is that also correct?" "Yes." "On that night, Ms. Morgan and I remind you that you are under oath. Did your sister Claire Morgan physically strike a man?" The courtroom leaned in. Victoria allowed herself a small private smile. "Yes," Rachel said. "She did." "And was there that night a fire that destroyed your family's apartment?" "Yes." "And did your sister subsequently lie to the police about the circumstances of that fire?" "Yes," Rachel said. "She did." Prentice turned to the judge with the satisfied air of a man who has already won. "Your Honor, the witness has confirmed under oath that the respondent has a history of violence, of destroying property, and of deceiving law enforcement. I have no further—" "May I finish?" Rachel said. Prentice paused. "You've answered the questions, Ms. Morgan." "I answered the questions," Rachel said, and her voice was steady, now steady and clear, and carrying to every corner of that silent room. "But I haven't told the truth, and I'm under oath, so I'm going to tell it, whether you like it or not." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, may I tell you what actually happened that night?" The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes who had been watching Prentice's performance with growing distaste, leaned forward. "Ms. Morgan, this is your testimony. You may tell me whatever is true." And Rachel Morgan looked across the courtroom at her sister, at Claire, who had raised her, who had saved her, who had carried the truth alone for 12 years to spare her, and she began to speak. "The man my sister struck that night was our father," Rachel said. "And she struck him because he had his hands around my throat. I was 12 years old, and he was drunk, and he was strangling me, and I was going to die. And my sister, my 19-year-old sister, hit him with a frying pan to make him let go of me. That's the violence this lawyer wants you to know about. That's the crime." Her voice never wavered. "A candle got knocked over in the struggle, and the apartment caught fire. That's the property she destroyed. And after she pulled me out of that fire, she went back into the flames, and she dragged our father out too, and she saved the life of the man who had just tried to kill his own daughter. And then when the police came, she told them she'd left me home alone and I'd started a cooking fire. That's the lie. She lied to protect me. Because if she'd told the truth that she'd assaulted our father, they would have taken me away from her and given me to relatives who were exactly as dangerous as he was. So she took a criminal charge at 19 years old to keep me safe. That's the woman this court is being asked to call an unfit mother." Appa. The courtroom was so silent, Ethan could hear his own heartbeat. Prentice was on his feet. Your Honor, this is an unverifiable account of events from 12 years ago, an emotional appeal with no, it's not unverifiable, Ethan's lead attorney said, rising smoothly. Your Honor, we can corroborate every word of Miss Morgan's testimony with physical, forensic, independently authenticated evidence taken the night in question, which we are prepared to enter into the record right now. And Ethan watched his mother's face. He watched Victoria Caldwell, who had built her entire strategy on the belief that Claire's past could only be told one way, that the facts were fixed and damning, and hers to wield watch as an attorney, lifted 3 authenticated forensic photographs and a lab technician's sworn affidavit, and he watched the exact moment his mother understood that she had lost. He watched her understand that she had with her own hands put on the stand the one witness who loved Claire enough to detonate everything. That she had taken the bravest act of Claire's life and in trying to twist it into a weapon, had instead handed Claire the sword. Victoria's face did not crumble. She was too controlled for that even now, but something behind her eyes went out, some certainty, some lifelong faith that she would always, always win. And for the first time in her son's memory, Victoria Caldwell looked in the middle of a crowded courtroom, entirely, utterly alone. The judge took the photographs. She looked at them for a long moment, and when she looked back up, her eyes went not to Rachel, not to the lawyers, but directly to Victoria Caldwell, and her voice when she spoke was quiet and cold and absolutely final. Mrs. Caldwell, the judge said, I've reviewed your petition, and now I've heard this testimony and I've seen this evidence. So before we go any further, I'm going to give you one opportunity to explain to this court exactly why you brought a petition to remove 3 children from a woman whose only crime 12 years ago was saving a child's life, and why you seem to have known so very much about a fire that the respondent herself has never spoken of publicly in over a decade. And in the silence that followed, as every reporter in the back row leaned forward and every eye in the courtroom turned to Victoria Caldwell, Ethan understood that the trap his mother had built for Claire had just closed instead around his mother's own throat. Victoria Caldwell did not answer the judge's question. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her chin lifted in the way it had been lifted for 62 years, and she said nothing at all, because there was nothing to say. Every answer led to a worse place than the last, and Victoria, whatever else she was, had never been a fool. Mrs. Caldwell, the judge said again, I asked you a question. Victoria's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering urgently, and Ethan watched his mother listen, without turning her head, watched her weigh the ruins of her strategy in that cold, quick mind of hers, and watched her make the only calculation left to make. Your Honor, Prentice said, straightening, in light of the testimony and evidence presented, my client wishes to withdraw her petition for guardianship, effective immediately, with prejudice. A ripple went through the courtroom. The judge looked at Victoria for a long, long moment. She withdraws, the judge repeated. That's convenient. But it doesn't answer my question, and it doesn't undo the fact that this court's time and this family's peace have been spent on a petition that appears on the evidence before me to have been brought in bad faith. She set down the photographs. Withdrawal is accepted. But I'm making a note in the record, Mrs. Caldwell, and I'm referring certain elements of what I've heard here today to the appropriate authorities. The forged photographs, the wire transfer, the concealment of these children. That is no longer a family matter. That is potentially criminal, and it is out of my hands now and into theirs. Victoria's face did not move, but her hands folded in her lap tightened until the knuckles went white. Ethan watched his mother absorb the words, and he felt none of the triumph he'd expected. He had imagined this moment for days, the moment Victoria Caldwell lost publicly completely. He had thought it would feel like justice. Instead, it felt like watching a building he'd grown up in collapse. Terrible, necessary, and sad in a way he hadn't been prepared for. Ms. Morgan, the judge said, turning to Claire, and her voice softened entirely. I want to say something to you, and I want it in the record. I've sat on this bench for 22 years, and I have rarely heard testimony that moved me the way your sisters did today. What you did at 19 years old, the choice you made, the charge you carried, the silence you kept to protect your sister. That is not the history of an unfit mother. That is the history of one of the most fit mothers I have ever encountered. These children are yours. They have always been yours, and no one is ever going to take them from you again. This matter is closed." The gavel came down, and Claire Morgan, who had walked into that courtroom certain she was going to lose her children, put her face in her hands and wept, and Rachel came down from the stand and wrapped her arms around her sister, and Ethan stood a few feet away, not touching either of them, letting them have the moment that was theirs. Across the room, Victoria Caldwell rose from her chair. She gathered her coat with the same composure she'd worn walking in, and for one moment, one single moment, she looked directly at her son. Ethan met her eyes. He waited for her to say something, an apology, a threat, anything. This was the woman who had raised him, who had shaped every belief he'd ever held, who had in her monstrous way believed she was protecting him. Part of him, a part he hated, still wanted her to say she was sorry. She didn't. "You've thrown it all away," Victoria said quietly so only he could hear. "For a waitress and 3 children who will grow up to resent you the moment they learn what you gave up for them. You'll see. In the end, love is the most expensive mistake a person can make. I only ever tried to save you from making it." And then she walked out of the courtroom alone, her heels clicking against the floor, and she did not look back. And Ethan understood that whatever came next, the investigators, the charges, the slow public dismantling of Victoria Caldwell, he would likely never hear his mother say she was sorry, because she wasn't. She would go to her grave believing she'd been right. That was, he realized, the loneliest thing he'd ever seen. He let her go, and then he turned to his family. China. Ethan expected that winning would fix everything. It didn't. That was the first hard lesson of the weeks that followed. The courtroom victory had solved the crisis, but it had not solved the 4 years he'd missed, and those 4 years turned out to be a wall he could not simply write a check to climb. Because the truth was, Ethan Caldwell had no idea how to be a father. He learned this on the very first afternoon he was left alone with the triplets. It was Claire's idea. She'd started her first shift at a new job Ethan had wanted to simply pay her rent higher. Her and nanny erased the whole architecture of her hardship overnight, and Claire had refused all of it with a fierceness that had startled him. "I'm not going to become dependent on you," she'd said. "I spent 5 years learning how to stand on my own 2 feet, and I'm not going to unlearn it because you feel guilty. You want to help, fine. Watch the children this afternoon while I go to work. Be their father for 4 hours by yourself. That's the help I need, not money. That." And so, at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, Claire kissed all 3 children goodbye, gave Ethan a look that was equal parts trust and warning, and walked out the door. The door had barely closed before everything fell apart. Emma started crying because Mama had left. Lucas decided this was the perfect moment to climb the bookshelf, which wobbled alarmingly under his weight, and Noah quiet. Noah disappeared into the bedroom and shut the door and would not come out. "Emma, sweetheart, it's okay, Mama's coming back," Ethan said, scooping up the crying toddler, who responded by crying harder and arching her whole small body backward in a way that nearly sent them both to the floor. Lucas, get down from there, that's not safe." "I climb it all the time," Lucas announced from halfway up the shelf. "You do not climb it all the time, please get down." The bookshelf lurched. Ethan lunged, one arm still holding Emma, and caught Lucas around the waist just as the whole thing tipped, and for one heart-stopping second, all 3 of them nearly went down together, and then he had them, both of them, Emma screaming in one arm, and Lucas laughing in the other, and the bookshelf settled back against the wall, and Ethan stood there breathing hard, his $10,000 composure completely gone. "That was fun," Lucas said. "Do it again." "We are never doing that again." And then he remembered Noah. He found the little boy sitting on the floor of the bedroom, back against the bed knees, pulled up to his chest, the green truck clutched against him. "Noah," Ethan said, sitting down carefully on the floor a few feet away, Emma finally quieting in his arms. "What's wrong, buddy?" Noah didn't answer. "You can tell me, whatever it is." "Mama always comes back," Noah said finally, so softly, Ethan almost didn't hear it. "But sometimes people don't come back. You didn't come back for a long time, so maybe Mama won't either." Ethan felt the words go into him like a blade. Noah. He set Emma down gently and moved closer until he was sitting right beside his son. Come here. Can I tell you something? Noah looked up at him with those wary eyes. You're right, Ethan said. I didn't come back for a long time, and I know that made you scared that people leave and don't come back. That's a real fear, and it makes complete sense, and I'm the reason you have it, and I'm so sorry. He took a breath. But here's the difference. I didn't come back because someone lied to me and told me you didn't exist. I would have come back every single day if I'd known. Your mama is different. Your mama has always known exactly where you are. She has never once, not for one day of your whole life, not come back to you. And she's not going to start today. She went to work so she can take care of you because that's what she does, because she loves you more than anything in the entire world. And in 4 hours, that door is going to open, and she's going to walk through it. I promise you. And if I'm wrong, he said, which I'm not, but if I'm wrong, then I will personally go find her and carry her home myself. Deal? Noah studied him for a long moment. Deal, he whispered. And then he leaned very slightly against Ethan's side. And they sat there on the bedroom floor, the two of them waiting out the fear together until Noah finally said, Can we make the truck do jumps? Yeah, Ethan said, his voice thick. Yeah, buddy, we can make the truck do jumps. By the time Claire came home 4 hours later, the apartment looked like a small war had been fought in it. There was flour on the ceiling. Ethan still wasn't entirely sure how the flour had gotten on the ceiling. Emma was wearing her shirt as pants. Lucas had drawn on his own face with a marker and was very proud of it. And Ethan Caldwell, billionaire, was sitting in the middle of the living room floor with a couch cushion fort collapsed around him and Noah asleep against his chest. And he looked up at Claire with an expression of such total, exhausted defeat that she burst out laughing before she could stop herself. How'd it go? She asked, surveying the wreckage. I have run companies with tens of thousands of employees, Ethan said hoarsely. I have never been this tired in my entire life. Claire laughed harder. And then she looked at Noah asleep against Ethan's chest. Noah, who did not fall asleep on people who did not trust easily, who had spent his whole short life keeping his guard up, and her laughter faded into something soft and complicated. He fell asleep on you, she said quietly. He was scared you weren't coming back, Ethan said. We talked it through. He's okay now. Claire was quiet for a moment. That's the first time he's ever fallen asleep on anyone but me, she said. In 4 years. And something passed across her face that Ethan couldn't quite name, a loosening, a lowering of one more brick in the wall she'd spent 5 years building. The days that followed taught Ethan things no business school ever had. He learned that his money was almost useless. He'd shown up one afternoon with an armful of expensive toys, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars, the kind that came in glossy boxes, and the children had played with the cardboard boxes instead, and completely ignored the toys. Lucas had built a spaceship out of the biggest box and refused to come out of it for 2 hours. Kids don't want expensive things, Claire told him, not unkindly, watching Ethan stare in bewilderment at $300 of ignored electronics. They want you. That's the whole secret. That's the thing your money can't buy and never could. Your attention, your time. You sitting on the floor with them for an hour with no phone. That's worth more to them than everything you own. Ethan learned to cook breakfast and burned the first 4 attempts, and Lucas rated each attempt on a scale of 1 to 10 and never gave him higher than a 4 until the second week, when Ethan finally produced pancakes that Lucas awarded a 7, and Ethan felt more pride in that 7 than in any deal he had ever closed. He learned that Emma would only fall asleep if you told her a story where she was the hero, and that the story had to be different every night, and that if you tried to reuse a story, she would open her eyes and say sternly, "Already," and you would have to start over. He learned that Noah's greatest fear was being forgotten, and that the way to soothe it was not with words, but with consistency, showing up again and again at the same time in the same way until the little boy's nervous system slowly began to believe that this was a thing it could count on. And he learned slowly, painfully, that being a father was not something you could master by being smart or by being rich or by trying hard. It was something you earned in 10,000 tiny, unglamorous moments. The scraped knee, the spilled juice, the 2 a.m. fever, the same book read for the 40th time, and that there were no shortcuts, and that the trying was the whole point. "I'm not good at this," he confessed to Claire one night, after a particularly hard day where all 3 children had been sick and miserable, and he'd felt utterly useless. "I keep thinking I'll figure out the trick to it, the system, the way to be good at it, but there isn't one, is there?" "No," Claire said gently, "there isn't. There's just showing up, over and over, on the good days and the terrible days. That's the whole job." She looked at him. "And Ethan, you are showing up. Every day. That's more than a lot of fathers ever do. That's more than you probably think it is." But not everything was healing. Because 2 weeks into this new fragile life, the past came back as it always does in the form of a phone call from Marcus Bell. "Ethan, I need to see you, in person, today. It's about your mother." They met at a coffee shop away from the apartment, and Marcus's face was grim. "The investigation into your mother is moving forward," Marcus said. "The forged photographs, the wire transfer, the whole thing. The DA's office is taking it seriously, but there's a complication." He slid a folder across the table. "Your mother has hired the best criminal defense firm in the city, and they're not just defending her, they're going on offense. And their strategy, Ethan, you need to understand what they're planning to do." Ethan opened the folder. "What is this?" "It's a countersuit. Your mother is going to argue that you and Claire conspired to extort her, that the whole thing is a scheme to seize control of the family trust. She's going to claim that Claire deliberately concealed the children in order to spring them on the family at a strategic moment for maximum financial leverage. And she's going to use—" Marcus hesitated. "She's going to use the fact that Claire never touched the $200,000 as evidence that Claire was always planning something bigger. Why leave $200,000 on the table, her lawyers will ask, unless you were holding out for $400 million. Ethan felt the old, cold fury rising. "That's insane. That's exactly backwards. Claire didn't touch the money because it felt like blood money. I know that. You know that. But her lawyers are going to stand in front of a jury and make it sound calculated. And here's the part that matters, Ethan." Marcus leaned forward. "They've subpoenaed your financial records, all of them, and they found something. In the weeks right after you learned about the children, you moved a significant amount of money. You changed your will. You began the process of adding the children to the trust. You canceled a wedding that would have merged 2 fortunes. From the outside, spun by a hostile lawyer, it looks like a man being manipulated. It looks like exactly the story your mother wants to tell. A gold-digging ex-wife, a compromised son, a calculated seizure of a family fortune." Ethan sat back slowly. "She's going to try to make me the victim of my own children," he said. "She's going to take the fact that I love them and the fact that I've been trying to protect them and turn it into evidence of a con." "Yes," Marcus said. "That's exactly what she's going to do. And Ethan, some of it on paper is going to be hard to explain to a jury who doesn't know these people the way we do." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "How do we beat it?" Marcus hesitated. "That's the thing. There's one piece of evidence that would end her countersuit completely. One thing that would prove beyond any argument that this was never about money for you or for Claire." He met Ethan's eyes. "But you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "The trust," Marcus said. "The $400 million. If you renounce it, if you and the children formally, legally, permanently give up all claim to the Caldwell family trust, then your mother's entire countersuit collapses, because you can't be accused of scheming to seize a fortune you've just given away. If the children never touch a dime of that money, then there was never a motive, and the whole extortion narrative falls apart. It's the one move she can't counter." Marcus paused. "But it means walking away from $400 million. It means your children never inherit the Caldwell fortune. It means your grandfather's whole legacy passes to I don't even know, charity, the state, anywhere but them." Ethan stared at the table. $400 million. His children's inheritance. The thing his mother had destroyed his marriage to control. The thing that had cost Claire 5 years of poverty and nearly cost her the children themselves. "If I renounce it," Ethan said slowly, "then everything my mother did was for nothing. She burned down our whole family to keep control of that money, and if I just give it away. Then she destroyed everything she destroyed for a fortune that no longer even exists in this family. It becomes meaningless. Her whole crime becomes meaningless. Yes, Marcus said quietly. It does. Ethan was silent for a long time. And then slowly something that was almost a smile crossed his face, a hard, clean, liberated thing. Good, he said. Marcus blinked. Good. Marcus, do you understand what you just handed me? Ethan leaned forward, and there was a light in his eyes now, fierce and free. My whole life, that money was the thing. The Caldwell fortune. The legacy. My mother worshipped it. My grandfather built his entire identity around it. It's the thing that's poisoned 3 generations of this family, and it's the thing my mother nearly killed my children over. And you're telling me that the way to finally permanently defeat her, to end her countersuit, to protect my family, to make her entire life's cruelty pointless, is to simply let the money go. He laughed, a real laugh, startled and relieved. I've been so afraid of losing it. This whole time. Some part of me was still holding on to it because I was raised to believe it was the most important thing in the world, but it's not. It never was. It's the thing that ate my family alive. And I get to be the one who finally kills it. Ethan, Marcus said carefully, that's $400 million for your children. My children don't need $400 million, Ethan said. I have my own money. Money I built clean. Money my mother never touched. They'll be provided for. They'll go to college. They'll never want for anything real. But the Caldwell Trust, he shook his head. That money has never once made anyone in my family happy. It made my grandfather cold. It made my mother a monster. It nearly cost me my children. I don't want it in their lives. I want it gone. And if getting rid of it also happens to destroy my mother's last weapon and prove to the whole world that this was never about money for us, he stood up, then it's not a sacrifice, Marcus. It's the best deal I've ever made in my life. Tais-toi, he told Claire that night. He'd expected he might have to convince her. He was wrong. You want to give away $400 million, Claire said slowly, sitting across from him at the little kitchen table. The children's inheritance. Yes. The money your mother destroyed our whole family to keep. Yes. Claire was quiet for a moment, and then to his surprise her eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table and took both his hands. Do you know how long I've waited? She said, her voice shaking. To hear you say that money doesn't matter more than us. 5 years, Ethan. 5 years ago, you were a man who let his mother run his life because he believed money and success were everything. And now you're sitting here telling me you want to throw away $400 million to protect 3 kids you met 3 weeks ago. She wiped her eyes. That's not a financial decision. That's who you've become, and it's the man I always hoped you could be back when I still loved you, before I stopped letting myself. Ethan's breath caught. Before you stopped letting yourself. Claire went still, realizing what she'd said. Claire, Ethan said carefully, did you stop loving me, or did you just stop letting yourself? The kitchen was very quiet. In the next room, the children were asleep. And Claire looked at him across the table, this man she had hated for 5 years and was now against every wall she'd built, beginning to see clearly for the first time, and she said very softly, I don't know. I've been so afraid to find out. Because if I let myself feel it again, and you leave or you change back or something goes wrong. Her voice broke. I barely survived it the first time, Ethan. I don't think I could survive it twice. I'm not going to leave. You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that. No, Ethan admitted. You're right. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise you this. I am not the man who left you. That man died in a restaurant 3 weeks ago when a little boy asked me if I was his daddy. And whoever I am now, I know one thing about him. He is never, ever going to choose anything over you and those children again. Not money, not my mother, not my career, nothing. I spent 37 years learning that lesson the hardest possible way, and I am not going to unlearn it. He turned his hands over so he was holding hers. You don't have to decide anything tonight. You don't have to let yourself feel anything you're not ready for. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere, however long it takes, even if it's years, even if it's forever. I'll be here showing up every single day until you either believe me or you tell me to stop." Claire looked down at their clasped hands. "Don't stop," she whispered. Whatever you do." She looked up, and her eyes were wet, and something in her face had finally come all the way open. "Don't stop showing up. That's all I need. That's all I've ever needed. Just don't stop." He renounced the trust the following week. The legal process was complex, but the meaning of it was simple. Ethan Caldwell and his 3 children permanently, irrevocably surrendered all claim to the $400 million Caldwell Family Trust. The money, by the terms of his grandfather's own document, would pass to a charitable foundation. One Ethan chose himself, a foundation that funded housing and childcare for single mothers, which felt to him like the closest thing to poetic justice he could arrange. And when the news reached Victoria Caldwell through her lawyers that the fortune she had spent 20 years guarding and had destroyed her own family to control was now gone, given away, dissolved, placed forever beyond her reach, she reportedly said nothing at all. She simply set down the phone and stared out the window for a very long time, because her son had done the one thing she could not comprehend. He had looked at $400 million and decided his children mattered more, and in doing so, he had rendered every terrible thing she'd ever done completely, permanently meaningless. She had burned down her family for a fortune, and her son had proven the fortune was worthless. It was the deepest defeat of Victoria Caldwell's life, and there was no one left for her to blame, and nothing left for her to seize, and no move left for her to make. The countersuit collapsed within days, exactly as Marcus had predicted. You cannot accuse a man of scheming to steal a fortune he has just given away. The criminal investigation, however, did not collapse. The forged photographs, the wire transfer, the conspiracy to conceal the children, those charges moved forward slowly through the machinery of the law. Victoria Caldwell would not go to prison. She was too old, too wealthy, too well lawyered for that. But she would be publicly disgraced, formally sanctioned, stripped of her position in the society she had ruled for 40 years. The woman who had spent her life terrified of scandal would spend her final years as the subject of the biggest scandal her circle had ever seen. And Ethan, who might once have felt vindicated by this, found that he mostly felt tired. "Do you hate her?" Claire asked him one night. "Your mother, after everything—" Ethan thought about it for a long time. "No," he finally said. "I thought I would. I wanted to for a while, but mostly I just feel sorry for her. She had a son and 3 grandchildren, and she had a chance to be part of a family that would have loved her, and she chose a pile of money instead. And now the money's gone, and the family's gone, and she's completely alone in that enormous house, and she still, to this day, doesn't understand what she did wrong. That's not a monster, Claire. Or it is, but it's a sad one. She could have had everything, and she threw it all away because she never once in 62 years understood what everything actually was." Claire was quiet. "You're not going to make the same mistake," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Ethan said. "I'm not. She taught me exactly what it costs. That's the one good thing she ever gave me, I think. She showed me exactly the man I could become if I kept choosing money over the people who love me. And I looked at that man, and I looked at her life, and I chose differently." He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Claire's ear, a gesture so natural and so long forgotten that neither of them remarked on it. "I chose this. I chose all of you, and it's the only choice I've ever made that I'm completely certain about." Tuck. The weeks turned into a month, and the month turned into something that almost resembled a life. Ethan moved out of his Manhattan penthouse. He didn't move into Claire's apartment. They both agreed that would be too fast, that the children needed their new reality to arrive in careful, digestible pieces. But he found a modest house a few blocks away, with a small yard in the same neighborhood. And he learned the route to the children's preschool by heart, and he became slowly a fixture in their lives. The dad who did pickup on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The dad who came to the school play and cried openly when Lucas cast as a tree delivered his single line, "I am a tree," with tremendous dignity. The dad who learned which cereal each child liked and kept all three in his kitchen for the mornings they stayed over. And one night, about 6 weeks in, Ethan was tucking Lucas into bed. The children now had actual beds in an actual second bedroom, one of the few things Claire had allowed him to provide. And Lucas, half asleep, reached up and grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy. You're not going to get lost again, right?" Lucas's voice was thick with sleep. "You said before you got lost. That's why you weren't here, but you found us now. So you're not going to get lost again." Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed and his throat closed up. "No," he said, "I'm never going to get lost again. I know exactly where you are now, all three of you, and I'm never ever going to lose that again as long as I live." Lucas nodded, satisfied, his eyes already closing. "Good," he mumbled, "'cause I like having a daddy." And then, on the very edge of sleep, in a voice barely above a breath, "Night, Daddy." Ethan sat on the edge of that small bed in the dark, listening to his son's breathing slow into sleep, and he thought about all of it. The empire he'd built, the billions he'd made, the deals, the jets, the penthouses, the wedding. He'd almost had to a woman he didn't love, the mother who'd taught him that all of that was what mattered. And he thought about how none of it, not one single piece of it, had ever once made him feel the way he felt right now, sitting in the dark with a sleeping 4-year-old's hand still loosely gripping his sleeve. The man who had chased billions his entire life had finally found the only thing that had ever been worth anything, and it fit in the palm of a child's hand. He leaned down and kissed his son's forehead, and then he sat there a while longer in no hurry to leave, listening to all three of his children breathe in the dark, marveling that he had almost lived his entire life without knowing this existed. In the doorway unseen, Claire watched him. She had come to say good night and had stopped in the doorway when she saw him sitting there, and she had not been able to make herself move. She watched the man she'd once loved and then hated, and was now she could no longer deny it. Falling in love with all over again, sit in the dark, and guard the sleep of their children. And she felt something in her chest that she had not allowed herself to feel in 5 long years. She felt safe. And Claire Morgan, who had been strong alone for so long that she'd forgotten there was any other way to be stood in that doorway, and let herself for the very first time imagine a future where she didn't have to carry everything by herself, where there were 2 of them, where the man in the dark room stayed and kept showing up and meant it. She didn't say anything, she just watched. And when Ethan finally rose and turned toward the door and saw her standing there, neither of them spoke. He crossed the room and he stopped in front of her, close enough to touch, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. 2 people who had lost 5 years and were standing in the wreckage and the hope of everything that came after. Ethan lifted his hand slowly and rested it against her cheek. And Claire, who had built a wall 5 years high and a mile thick, who had sworn she would never let herself be this vulnerable again, who had survived everything alone, precisely because she'd stopped letting anyone close enough to hurt her. Claire closed her eyes and leaned into his hand and did not pull away. They did not kiss that night. Ethan's hand was against her cheek, and Claire's eyes were closed, and every particle of the air between them wanted it to happen. But at the last moment, Claire opened her eyes and stepped back gently and pressed her palm flat against his chest. "Not yet," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I want to. God help me, I want to. But if we do this, if I let myself all the way back in, I need it to be real. I need it to be forever, not a rebound off 5 years of hating you, not a thank you for saving my children. I need to know it's the 2 of us choosing each other clear-eyed on purpose. And I'm not there yet. I'm close, but I'm not there." Ethan lowered his hand. "Then I'll wait," he said simply, "as long as it takes. I told you, Claire, I'm not going anywhere." And he meant it, and she saw that he meant it, and that more than any kiss was the thing that finally began to melt the last of the ice around her heart. So they waited. And in the waiting, something better than romance began to grow: a friendship, a partnership. The slow, unglamorous work of 2 people learning to trust each other, again, one ordinary day at a time. The weeks became months. Autumn turned to winter, and the strange new family settled into rhythms that would have been unimaginable half a year before. Ethan sold his company, Not all of it, but the controlling stake stepping back from the day-to-day trading the empire for something he'd never had time. The financial press called it a shocking retreat. His mother, from her exile, reportedly called it proof he'd lost his mind. Ethan called it the smartest thing he'd ever done because it meant he was there for the fevers and the school plays and the endless, precious, ordinary Tuesdays. He was not good at all of it even now. He still burned the occasional breakfast. He still sometimes reached for his wallet when what a moment actually needed was his patience. Old habits 37 years deep did not vanish overnight, but he was trying, always trying, and the children could feel the trying, and children forgive a great deal when they can feel that you are genuinely imperfectly trying. Noah changed the most. The quiet, wary boy who had spent his whole short life braced for abandonment began slowly to unclench. He stopped keeping one hand on Ethan's arm to make sure he was still there. He stopped asking every single night whether Daddy was coming back tomorrow. And then one afternoon, months in, Noah did something that stopped Ethan's heart. He fell down in the yard, scraped his knee, started to cry, and instead of running to Claire, as he had always done, he ran to Ethan. He ran to his father. He buried his face in Ethan's chest and cried and let his father hold him. And in that moment, both of them understood that a wall had finally come all the way down. "You came to me?" Ethan said quietly, holding his son, his own eyes wet. "You fix things," Noah mumbled into his shirt. "You fix my truck, so you can fix my knee." Ethan pressed his lips to the top of his son's head. "Yeah," he whispered. "I can fix your knee. I can fix anything you bring me. That's my job." There was one wound, though, that Ethan could not fix by showing up, and it belonged to Claire. Because as much as the two of them had healed, there remained between them a thing unspoken. 5 years of a hatred that had turned out to be built on a lie. Claire had spent those years believing Ethan had abandoned her, had cheated on her, had chosen his empire over their family. She had taught herself to hate him with a completeness that had sustained her through the hardest years of her life. And now that she knew none of it had been true, that the man she'd hated had never existed, that he'd been a fiction built by his mother's cruelty, she was left holding 5 years of misdirected rage with nowhere to put it. "I don't know what to do with it," she confessed to him one night after the children were asleep. "All that hate, I built my whole life on it. Every hard morning, every double shift, every night I cried in the bathroom. I got through it by hating you. You were the villain of my story. And now I find out you were never the villain at all, and I don't. Ethan, I feel like I grieved a man who was never real. I hated a ghost. And underneath the hate this whole time there was just..." Her voice cracked. "There was just love that had nowhere to go. And that's almost worse, because at least the hate protected me, and now I don't have it anymore, and I'm just standing here with all this love I spent 5 years pretending I didn't have." Ethan reached across and took her hands. "Then give it to me," he said quietly. "All of it. The love and the anger and the grief and every hard night. I'll take it. That's what I'm here for, Claire. To finally be the person who carries it with you. You don't have to know what to do with it. You just have to stop carrying it alone." Claire looked at him for a long, long moment, and then very quietly she said, "I was so angry at you for so long that I forgot I used to laugh with you. Do you remember? Before all of it, we used to laugh, in that restaurant. That's why I went back there that day with the children. I wasn't looking for you. I was looking for the girl I used to be, the one who laughed." "I remember," Ethan said softly. "I remember everything. I remember you used to steal the crispy edges off my eggs. I remember you couldn't sleep unless the closet door was closed. I remember you cried at insurance commercials and pretended you had something in your eye. I remember all of it, Claire. I never forgot a single thing about you. I just buried it because remembering hurt too much." Claire's eyes filled. "You remember about the eggs?" "I remember about the eggs." And she laughed a wet, broken surprise laugh, and it was the laugh he'd been waiting 5 years to hear, and something between them in that moment finally completely came back to life. Winter deepened, and the day came that neither of them had planned, but both had been moving toward from the moment their eyes met across that restaurant. It was nothing dramatic. That was the thing about it. After all the courtrooms and the crises and the $400 million and the mother who'd tried to burn it all down, the moment that finally mattered was small and quiet and almost ordinary. Ethan had come over for dinner as he did most nights now. He'd made the dinner pancakes Lucas's favorite, awarded a rare 8, and they'd fed the children and bathed them and put them to bed, all 3 of them in the routine that had become second nature. And afterward, Ethan and Claire had done the dishes together side by side, his hands in the soapy water, and hers drying the way they had 1,000 years ago when they were young and poor and happy and had no idea that the world was going to try to take it all from them. And Claire had turned to hand him a dry plate, and their hands had met on it, and neither of them had let go. "Ethan," Claire said. "Yeah, I'm there." He went still. "What?" "I'm there." Her eyes were shining. "You asked me months ago if I'd stopped loving you or just stopped letting myself, and I've been trying to figure out the answer ever since, and I finally have it." She set down the plate. She took both his wet hands in hers. "I never stopped. Not for one single day of those 5 years. I just buried it so deep that I convinced myself the hate was all there was. But it was never all there was. Underneath it the whole time I loved you, and I'm done burying it. I'm done being afraid. I'm there, Ethan. I'm all the way there. I choose you, clear-eyed, on purpose, forever." Ethan Caldwell, who had closed billion-dollar deals without his voice changing, could not speak. "Say something," Claire whispered. "I don't—" His voice broke completely. "I've been waiting so long to hear you say that now that you have, I don't have any words. I just have—" He pulled her into his arms, and she came finally, completely no wall left between them. "I just have this." And this time when he kissed her, she did not pull away. She kissed him back like a woman who had spent 5 years in a drought and had finally come home to the rain. They married in the spring. Not a grand wedding, not a merger of fortunes, not a society event, not the kind of wedding Victoria Caldwell would have understood. They married in the backyard of Ethan's modest house with maybe 30 people, and Rachel was the maid of honor, and the ring bearer was Lucas, who took the job with tremendous seriousness and delivered the rings on a pillow he had insisted on decorating himself, and the flower girl was Emma, who scattered exactly 3 petals and then decided she'd rather eat the rest, and Noah stood beside his father as the best man, 4 years old, in a tiny suit, holding the green truck in one hand because he refused to be parted from it even for the ceremony. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, there was a silence, and Ethan thought absurdly of his mother, who had not been invited, who was somewhere across the city alone in her enormous house, who had tried so hard to make this exact moment impossible. And he felt in that silence not triumph and not even anger anymore, just a kind of quiet final grief for the woman who could have been standing here, part of this, loved by these children, and who had chosen a pile of money over all of it. And lost. And then the silence passed, and no one objected because there was no one left who wanted to, and Ethan Caldwell married the woman he had loved and lost and found again in a backyard with their 3 children at their feet. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said, and Lucas, who had been vibrating with anticipation, shouted, "Finally!" at the top of his lungs, and everyone laughed, and Ethan kissed his wife while their son cheered and their daughter ate flower petals, and their other son held a green truck, and it was without any competition whatsoever the happiest moment of Ethan Caldwell's entire life. His mother never fully came back. There were over the years occasional attempts. A letter once that Ethan read twice and then set down without replying because it contained a great deal about the family name and the family legacy, and not one single word of apology or one single question about the grandchildren she'd never met. A phone call another time that Ethan took, and that ended when Victoria referred to Claire again as that woman. And Ethan said very calmly, "Her name is Claire. She's my wife. And until you can say her name, we have nothing to discuss," and hung up. He did not hate his mother. He had meant what he'd said to Claire that night. He mostly felt sorry for her. But he had also learned in the hardest possible way that some people cannot be saved from themselves, and that a person's love for you does not obligate you to let them keep hurting you. Victoria had made her choice over and over at every possible juncture, and she was still making it alone in her house, choosing pride over her own grandchildren. And so Ethan built the family she couldn't be part of. He let her go not with hatred, but with a kind of clear-eyed sorrow, and he turned toward the people who had chosen love back. The children never knew their paternal grandmother. When they were older and asked, Ethan told them the truth in age-appropriate pieces that their grandmother had made, some terrible choices that she had hurt their mother very badly, and that sometimes the loving thing to do is to keep people who won't stop hurting you at a distance. And the children accepted this the way children accept most things about the adult world, with a shrug and a return to whatever game they'd been playing, because they had never once in their whole remembered lives lacked for love. There was no grandmother-shaped hole in them, because their lives were full. The years went by the way years do. Lucas grew up fearless and loud and impossible not to love, and became the kind of teenager who organized everyone and everything, a born leader. And Ethan would sometimes watch him take charge of a room and think about a 4-year-old boy who had appointed himself the man of the house, the protector of a mother who'd had no one else, and he would have to look away so no one would see his face. Noah grew up quiet and tender and observant. The one who noticed when someone was sad, the one who remembered everyone's birthday, and he kept that green truck on a shelf in his room straight through high school, and he never once explained to any friend why it was there, and he didn't have to because he knew and his father knew, and that was enough. Emma grew up to be exactly the queen she had always been, brilliant and imperious and warm, and she ruled her brothers with the same iron affection she'd shown at 4 years old. And she and Claire were so alike that watching them argue was like watching a woman argue with a mirror, and Ethan loved every second of it. And Claire grew over the years into a woman who no longer flinched. The permanent tension left her shoulders. The dark circles faded. She stopped bracing for the moment it would all be taken away, because it was not taken away, not that year, or the next, or the one after that, and slowly her body learned what her heart had been afraid to believe, that she was safe now, that she was loved now, that she would never again have to carry everything alone. She went back to school in her 30s and became a social worker because she said she knew what it was to be a woman drowning, that the world had decided to call unfit, and she wanted to be the person in the room who saw the truth instead of the paperwork. And she was by every account extraordinary at it. She saved families the way her sister had once been saved. She became for other people the thing no one had been for her. And every year on the anniversary of the day they'd met again in that restaurant, the whole family went back. To the same small place in Brooklyn, to the booth where a billionaire had once frozen at the sight of a boy with his own eyes. And they ordered too much food, and the children, not so little anymore, groaned about the tradition, even as they secretly loved it. And Ethan would look around the table at his wife and his 3 children and think about how close he'd come to living an entire life without ever knowing that any of them existed. There was one more moment years later that Ethan would carry with him to the end of his life. Victoria Caldwell died alone. She was 81, and she'd been alone for a long time by then in the great empty house tended by paid staff and visited by almost no one, the society she'd ruled having long since moved on and forgotten her. And when the call came, Ethan sat with the news for a long time, and then he drove to that house one final time. He was the only family who came. He stood in the study where she'd made the phone call that destroyed his family all those years ago, and he looked at the portraits and the antiques and the accumulated evidence of a life spent worshiping the wrong God. And he felt the grief he'd been carrying for decades finally settle into something quiet and finished. On her desk, he found a single photograph. It was old, its edges worn as though it had been handled many times. It was a picture of Ethan as a small boy, maybe 4 years old, with a mop of dark hair that wouldn't lie flat and stubborn gray-green eyes the same age Lucas and Noah and Emma had been when he'd found them, the same eyes he'd recognized across a restaurant. She'd kept it on her desk. All those years alone, she'd kept a photograph of her son as a child within arm's reach. Ethan stood there for a long time holding it, and he understood finally and completely the whole tragedy of Victoria Caldwell, that she had loved him. In her broken, poisonous, ruinous way, she had genuinely loved him. She had destroyed his family because some twisted part of her had believed she was protecting the one thing she loved. And she had been so catastrophically wrong, so unable to understand what love actually required, that she had spent her love like a weapon and ended up with nothing. No son, no grandchildren, no family. Just a photograph of a little boy she'd loved so badly that she'd lost him. Ethan did not cry for the woman who had tried to steal his children, but he cried a little for the mother who had kept his childhood photograph on her desk until the day she died, and never once understood why keeping the photograph wasn't the same as keeping the child. He took the photograph home. He didn't quite know why. Perhaps because it was the only piece of his mother that had ever been honest. That night, back in the house that had become a home, Ethan tucked the photograph away in a drawer and went to find his family. They were in the living room, all of them. The children, nearly grown now, sprawled across the furniture in the comfortable chaos of a family that has been together long enough to take each other completely for granted, which is its own kind of miracle. Claire was on the couch, and she looked up when he came in, and she read his face the way she'd been reading it for years now. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Ethan said, and he found somewhat to his surprise that it was true. "Yeah, I'm okay." He sat down beside his wife, and Emma, 17 now and taller than her mother, flopped down against his other side without looking up from her phone, the casual affection of a daughter who had never once in her life doubted she was loved. And Lucas said something that made Noah laugh, and Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, and the ordinary evening went on around him. And Ethan Caldwell, who had once owned a company worth billions, who had once lived in a penthouse above the whole shining city, who had once believed, because his mother taught him to, that money and success and the family name were the only things that mattered, sat in a modest living room in Brooklyn, surrounded by the people who had remembered him and knew that he was the richest man who had ever lived, because he understood now what his mother had died without ever understanding. That a fortune is just a number, that a company is just a thing you build to fill the hours, that a name carved into a building is just stone, and that the only wealth that has ever been real, the only legacy that has ever mattered, the only thing a person carries with them out of this world is the love they gave and the love they were given in return. His mother had kept a photograph and lost the child. He had given away $400 million and kept the family. And sitting there with his wife's head on his shoulder and his daughter against his side and his sons laughing across the room, Ethan Caldwell finally understood the truth that had taken him half a lifetime and cost him everything to learn that he had not saved this family. This family had saved him.